In the dusty workshops, smoky forges and quiet temples of ancient Greece, ordinary people smiths, weavers, scribes, and laborers wove the threads of a civilization that still shapes our world. Whispers of Olympus, boring tales from ancient Greece uncovers the unsung resilience behind the myths, from Themis's divine laws to Cyclopean walls, revealing how the humblest tasks sparked epic legacies of order, rebellion, and destiny that echo in our modern lives. Themis Unveiled, the goddess of divine order and early Greek legal foundations. You settle into the quiet folds of history. Imagine yourself wandering the sun-baked hills of ancient Greece, where the air carries the faint scent of olive groves and the distant echo of waves against rocky shores. In this world, long before the grand temples of Athens rose to pierce the sky, the figure of Themis loomed large not as a dramatic heroine of epic battles, but as a steady, unyielding presence in the fabric of daily existence. Themis, the Titaness of divine law and order, embodied the somber verdict that governed both gods and mortals alike. Her name, derived from the Greek word for that which is put in place, evokes the meticulous arrangement of societal norms that kept chaos at bay in a time when survival hinged on communal harmony. In the mythological tapestry, Themis was one of the original Titans, daughter of Uranus and Gaia, those primordial forces of sky and earth. She sat beside Zeus on Olympus, advising him with prophecies that whispered of future calamities and triumphs. Yet, to understand her true significance, you must delve into the historical underpinnings of her cult, which stretched back to the Bronze Age around 3000 BCE, when Minoan and Mycenaean civilizations laid the groundwork for what would become Greek society. Archaeological digs at sites like Knossos on Crete reveal linear tablets, those enigmatic clay records etched with symbols we still struggle to fully decipher, that hint at early legal codes regulating trade, inheritance, and disputes over land. These weren't the stuff of heroic tales, but the boring, essential ledgers of everyday life. How many amphorae of oil one farmer owed another, or the penalties for grazing sheep on forbidden pastures. Themis's worship likely emerged from these practical needs. Temples dedicated to her, though modest compared to those of Athena or Apollo, dotted the landscape from Delphi to Dodona. At Dodona, the oldest oracle in Greece, priests interpreted the rustling of sacred oak leaves as Themis's voice, guiding kings and commoners on matters as mundane as marriage contracts or boundary stones. You can picture the scene: a petitioner, perhaps a weary shepherd from the Peloponnese, arriving after days of travel on dusty paths, offering a simple libation of milk and honey. The priests, cloaked in plain woolen robes, would listen to the wind through the branches, translating it into advice that reinforced social order. This wasn't flashy divination. It was the slow grind of maintaining equilibrium in a world prone to earthquakes, famines, and petty feuds. Historically, Themis's influence seeped into the evolution of Greek law. By the Archaic period, around 800 to 500 BCE, city-states like Sparta and Athens began formalizing rules that echoed her principles. In Sparta, the retro set of oral laws attributed to the legendary Lycurgus emphasized equality among citizens, a divine order that Themis might have approved. These laws dictated everything from the distribution of helot labor to the training of young warriors in the agage, where boys learned endurance through sparse meals and rigorous drills. Imagine the daily routine: rising at dawn to march in formation, eating black broth made from pork blood and vinegar, or under the watchful eye of elders enforcing Themis-like discipline. Such details, though dull, forged a resilient society that withstood Persian invasions. In Athens, Solon's reforms in 594 BCE drew from similar ideals. Facing economic strife, where debt slavery threatened to unravel the polis, Solon cancelled debts and restructured classes based on agricultural yield rather than birthright. His Cyclopean, or shaking off of burdens, was a somber verdict against inequality. Much like Themis weighing scales in her depictions, vase paintings from this era show her holding a sword, and scepter, symbols of impartial justice, influencing how magistrates resolve disputes in the Agora. You might envision a typical day there. Merchants haggling over pottery shards used as ballots, scribes recording verdicts on wax tablets, all amid the hum of voices debating inheritance laws that protected widows and orphans. But as these systems took root, cracks began to appear. What happened when divine order clashed with human ambition? When a tyrant's whim overrode the Titaness's quiet counsel? As you linger in the ancient Greek world, picture yourself standing in the Agora of Athens, where dust swirls around the sandals of merchants and magistrates, and the air hums with the weight of decisions being made. Themis, the Titaness of divine order, remains a guiding force, her influence woven into the very fabric of these early societies. Her role wasn't just mythological, it was practical, shaping how communities resolved conflicts and maintained stability in a world where survival often depended on collective agreement. In this section, you'll walk deeper into the historical landscape of archaic Greece, where Themis's principles faced the test of human flaws, greed, power, and the struggle for fairness. By the 7th century BCE, Greek city-states were grappling with the growing pains of expanding populations and trade networks. Excavations at sites like Corinth and Thebes reveal how bustling markets demanded clear rules to govern commerce. Pottery fragments inscribed with early laws show meticulous regulations, fines for shortchanging customers, or rules dictating the proper weight of grain sacks. These weren't grand decrees, but the kind of tedious details Themis embodied rules to ensure no one's olive harvest was unfairly taxed, or that a weaver's cloth wasn't stolen in the market's chaos. You can imagine a trader, his hands stained with dye, arguing his case before a council, citing Themis's divine fairness to demand restitution for a botched deal. Themis's influence extended beyond markets into the sacred and legal realms. At Delphi, her oracle preceded Apollo's, and priests there continued to invoke her name when advising rulers. A clay tablet from 650 BCE, found near the sanctuary, records a dispute between two farmers over a shared well. The priest's verdict, etched in careful script, mandated equal water-sharing hours, a solution rooted in Themis's ethos of balance. Picture the farmers, weathered by sun and labor, standing before the altar, their futures hanging on this quiet ruling. Such moments, though mundane, prevented feuds that could fracture communities. Themis's cult sites, like the one at Rhamnus, featured simple stone altars where offerings, barley cakes, or small bronze figurines were left by those seeking her guidance in disputes over inheritance or grazing rights. Yet, human ambition often strained her divine order. In Athens, before Solon's reforms, the aristocracy hoarded land, reducing poorer citizens to sharecroppers bound by crippling debts. The Eupatridae, the elite families, controlled the courts, twisting justice to favor their kin. You might envision a desperate farmer, his fields barren from drought, facing eviction, while a noble, clad in fine linen, cites a biased law to claim his land. Themis's ideals of fairness were invoked in protests as commoners gathered in the Agora, demanding reform. Solon's Cyclopean, introduced in 594 BCE, was a direct response, abolishing debt slavery and redistributing economic burdens. His laws, carved on wooden axons, were displayed publicly, ensuring transparency and nod to Themis's unyielding gaze. Sparta, too, reflected her influence in its rigid social structure. The Rhetra, like Kyrgyz's oral constitution, mandated equal land allotments for citizens, enforced by councils who saw themselves as agents of divine order. Young Spartans, trained in the agage, learned to value collective discipline over personal gain, a principle tied to Themis's cosmic balance. Daily life was austere. Boys slept on reed mats, ate meager rations, and practiced drills under the stars, all to forge a society resilient against external threats. But even here, tensions simmered. Helots, the enslaved underclass, toiled under harsh conditions, their resentment a silent challenge to the order Themis supposedly upheld. As these systems evolved, a question loomed: could Themis's divine justice withstand the pressures of rising tyrants and restless masses, or would her scales tip toward chaos? As you stand at the edge of history, imagine yourself in the shadow of Athens' Acropolis, where the clamor of the agora fades, and the weight of Themis's legacy settles over the city like dusk. The Titaness of divine order, whose principles shaped the early laws of Greece, now faces the ultimate test. Could her ideals of justice and balance endure the turbulence of human nature and the rise of new political forces? In this final section, you'll witness how Themis's influence persisted or faltered as Greek society evolved, leaving a legacy that resonates even in our modern understanding of fairness. By the 6th century BCE, the reforms of Solon in Athens had begun to reshape the polis, but they were not a panacea. His Cyclopean freed many from debt slavery, yet the aristocracy's grip on power lingered. You can picture a scene in the Agora, a freed farmer, now a citizen, casting a pottery shard to vote in the assembly, his hand trembling with newfound agency. But the system wasn't perfect. Solon's laws, inscribed on wooden axioms, were debated fiercely. Some argued they favored the wealthy, others that they gave too much voice to the poor. Themis's scales, invoked in these debates, symbolized the ideal of impartiality, yet magistrates often swayed under bribes or clan loyalties. Excavations at Athens reveal astraka shards used for ostracism votes bearing names of politicians, accused of undermining this balance, a practice that emerged to protect the city from tyranny. In Sparta, Themis's influence was subtler but no less profound. The Rhetra, like Kyrgyz's constitution, enforced a society where equality among citizens was sacrosanct, yet it rested on the exploitation of helots. Imagine a Spartan elder, his face lined from years of war, inspecting fields worked by helots, who whispered of rebellion under their breath. Themis's order demanded stability, but at what cost? The Crypteia, a secret police force, patrolled at night, silencing dissent with violence, a grim reminder that divine justice could be twisted to serve power. Archaeological finds, like bronze dedications at Spartan sanctuaries, show offerings to Themis, perhaps pleas for her to bless this fragile equilibrium. Themis's sacred sites, like the oracle at Dodona, continued to guide decisions. A bronze tablet from 550 BCE records a query from a Boeotian merchant, asking whether to expand his trade routes. The priest's response, vague yet authoritative, urged caution, reflecting Themis's role in tempering ambition with foresight. Such consultations, though tedious, shaped economic stability, ensuring merchants didn't overextend and destabilize their communities. You might envision the merchant, his cart laden with amphorae, pausing at the sanctuary to offer a clay figurine, hoping Themis would guard his livelihood. As democracy took root in Athens by the 5th century BCE, Themis's legacy found new expression. In the courts of the Areopagus and the broader jury system, citizens, from potters to landowners, judged cases ranging from theft to homicide, their verdicts echoing her impartiality. Yet, the rise of figures like Cleisthenes, who expanded democratic participation, showed that Themis's principles could evolve beyond rigid tradition. Her worship waned as gods like Athena took prominence, but her ethos endured in the legal codes that underpinned Western jurisprudence. Reflecting on Themis's story, you might wonder how her somber verdict shapes our world today. From modern constitutions to international law, the pursuit of balance she represented persists. Though human flaws, greed, power, inequality still challenge it, her quiet presence reminds us that justice, though often forged in mundane details, is the bedrock of resilient societies. What happens when we, like the Greeks, invoke fairness but struggle to uphold it? Cyclopean forges, Bronze Age smiths, and the mythical one-eyed Johnsus. You step into the smoky haze of a Bronze Age workshop. Imagine the rhythmic clang of hammer on bronze, the air thick with the scent of charcoal and molten metal. In the heart of Mycenaean Greece, around 1600 to 1200 BCE, skilled smiths toiled in dimly lit forges, crafting tools, weapons, and offerings that sustained both daily life and divine worship. These artisans, often overlooked in the shadow of kings and warriors, were the backbone of a civilization that birthed the myths of the Cyclops, those one-eyed giants, whose legendary forges churned out divine artifacts like Zeus's thunderbolts. The connection between these mythical giants and the real smiths of the Aegean is no mere coincidence, it's a testament to the awe inspired by the craft of metalworking, a process both mundane and miraculous in its time. Archaeological finds at sites like Mycenaean and Pylos reveal the gritty reality of these workshops. Excavations have uncovered clay crucibles, their interiors stained with copper residue, and stone molds for casting axe heads and sickle blades. Picture a smith, his face glistening with sweat, tending a fire fueled by olive wood, carefully controlling its heat to melt ingots of bronze, a precious alloy of copper and tin, often imported from distant Cyprus or Anatolia. The process was laborious. Bellows made of leather and wood pumped air to stoke the flames, while the smith stirred the molten metal with a clay rod, ensuring it flowed evenly into molds. These tools weren't just utilitarian, they were vital for survival, enabling farmers to clear land, warriors to defend citadels, and priests to offer polished bronze mirrors to the gods. The Cyclops of myth, as described in Homer's Odyssey and Hesiod's Theogony, were more than monstrous figures. They were divine craftsmen, dwelling in volcanic caves, perhaps inspired by the fiery forges of real smiths. Working near volcanic regions like Thera or Lemnos, you can envision a Mycenaean villager watching sparks fly from a forge at dusk, likening the smith's single-minded focus to a one-eyed giant. His hammer strikes echoing like thunder. These myths likely grew from the oral traditions of communities who revered metalworkers as near-divine figures. A bronze dagger from a shaft grave at Mycenae, its blade inlaid with gold, shows the artistry involved, each inlay depicting a lion. Hunt required hours of meticulous labor, a skill so rare it seemed supernatural. The smiths' lives were far from glamorous. Workshops, often tucked into the edges of settlements, were cramped and hazardous. Slag heaps, piles of glassy waste from smelting found at turns suggest long hours of repetitive work, with smiths inhaling acrid fumes that blackened their lungs. Yet their role was critical. Linear tablets from Pylos, written in an early Greek script, record allocations of bronze to smiths, alongside rations of barley and figs to sustain them. A typical day might involve crafting a spearhead for a warrior, then repairing a plough for a farmer, all under the watchful eye of a palace overseer. These men, often of low social status, held the power to transform raw ore into objects that shaped society. But as the Bronze Age waned, dark clouds gathered. The collapse of Mycenaean civilization around 1200 BCE threatened these forges and the skills they preserved. What would happen to the smiths and the myths they inspired when invasions and economic decline silenced their hammers? As you linger in the heat of a Mycenaean forge, imagine the glow of molten bronze casting flickering shadows on the rough stone walls. The smiths of Bronze Age Greece, toiling in their workshops around 1400 BCE, were more than craftsmen. They were alchemists of their age, transforming raw ore into tools and weapons that sustained a civilization teetering between prosperity and peril. The myths of the Cyclops, those one-eyed giants crafting divine artifacts, grew from the ore these artisans inspired, but their real-world lives were marked by grueling labor and fragile dependence on distant trade. Networks. In this section, you'll step deeper into their world, where the clang of hammers met the growing tensions of a society on the brink. Archaeological evidence from sites like Knossos and Pylos paints a vivid picture of the smith's craft. Excavations reveal clay tires pipes used to channel air into furnaces worn smooth by years of use, and bronze ingots stamped with symbols indicating their origin, often from Cyprus's copperage mines. You can picture a smith, his hands calloused and scarred, carefully weighing tin and copper to achieve the perfect alloy, a process requiring precision honed over decades. A single miscalculation could ruin a batch, wasting resources that took months to acquire. Linear tablets from Mycenae list allocations of bronze to name smiths men like Electryon, son of Eteocles, who received rations of wheat and wine in exchange for their work. Their days began at dawn, stoking fires with charcoal, shaping spearheads or chisels, and repairing cauldrons for palace feasts, all under the scrutiny of overseers who answered to the Wainax, the king. The Cyclopean myths likely drew from the mystique of these forges, especially in volcanic regions, On Lemnos, sacred to Hephaestus, god of smithing, natural gas vents and sulphurous springs fueled tales of subterranean workshops. Imagine a villager hearing the hiss of cooling metal and seeing sparks fly, whispering of giants laboring beneath the earth. Artifacts like the bronze tripod cauldrons from Olympia, with their intricate handles, reflect this reverence, each leg cast in a single pour, a feat requiring such skill it seemed divine. These objects weren't just functional, they were status symbols offered at sanctuaries or buried with elites in Tholos tombs. Their craftsmanship a bridge between mortal and divine. Yet, the smith's world was precarious. Trade routes bringing tin from as far as modern-day Afghanistan were vulnerable to piracy and drought. A shipwreck off Alaburan, dated to 1300 BCE, carried 10 tons of copper and a ton of tin, enough to arm a small army, but such cargoes were rare. When supplies dwindled, smiths faced pressure to produce more with less, often recycling broken tools. You might envision a tense moment, a smith arguing with a palace scribe over dwindling bronze stocks, knowing a failed harvest could mean starvation for his family. Socially, smiths occupied a liminal space, essential yet marginal, their skills revered but their status low. Some, granted land by the palace, gained modest wealth, but most lived hand to mouth, their survival tied to the palace economy. Daughters. The Bronze Age neared its end around 1200 BCE. Cracks deepened. Sea peoples, invaders from unknown lands, disrupted trade, while earthquakes toppled citadels. Forges fell silent as palaces burned. Could the smiths and the Cyclopean myths they inspired survive this collapse, or would their fires be extinguished forever? As you stand amid the fading embers of a Mycenaean forge, imagine the air heavy with the scent of ash and the distant cries of a civilization unraveling. Around 1200 BCE, the Bronze Age world of Greece teetered on the edge of collapse, and the smiths, those unsung artisans whose hammers once echoed, like the mythical Cyclops, faced a world where their craft and the myths it inspired hung in the balance. The forges that produced bronze tools and weapons, so vital to Mycenaean society, now flickered under the shadow of invasions, trade disruptions, and societal upheaval. In this final section, you'll see how these craftsmen navigated the end of an era and how their legacy endured, shaping both history and legend. The collapse of the Mycenaean civilization, often called the Bronze Age collapse, was a slow catastrophe. Archaeological evidence from sites like Titaness and Mycenae shows charred ruins and abandoned workshops, their clay crucibles cracked and slag heaps left to crumble. The sea peoples, mysterious raiders from across the Mediterranean, severed trade routes, choking off supplies of tin and copper. You can picture a smith, his forge cold, staring at a dwindling pile of bronze scraps, forced to melt down heirloom daggers to craft a single plough blade. Linear tablets from Pylos, some of the last before the palaces fell, record desperate inventories, bronze allocated not for weapons but for emergency repairs to ships or farm tools. These records, etched in clay, reveal a society scrambling to survive as harvests failed and invaders loomed. Yet, amid this chaos, the smiths showed resilience. Some fled to remote villages, carrying their knowledge to places like Lefkindi, where excavations reveal small-scale forges continuing into the early Iron Age, around 1100 BCE. These smiths adapted, experimenting with iron, a cheaper, more abundant metal, though its forging required new techniques, like higher furnace temperatures achieved with improved bellows. Imagine a weary artisan teaching his apprentice to hammer iron into crude knives, preserving the craft in a world without palaces. The Cyclopean myths, too, endured, carried by oral poets who wove tales of one-eyed giants into stories of survival. A bronze figurine from Delphi, dated to 1000 BCE, depicts a smith at work, suggesting that the reverence for metalworkers persisted, their role now tied to rebuilding communities. The myths of the Cyclops evolved, blending with new realities. In later Greek stories, like those in Hesiod's Theogony, the Cyclops became divine craftsmen aiding Zeus, forging thunderbolts in volcanic forges, a nod to the real smiths who once powered Mycenaean might. Archaeological finds, such as a bronze shield from a warrior's grave in Achea, show that some craftsmanship survived. Passed down through generations, these artifacts, though simpler than their Bronze Age predecessors, carried the same meticulous care, their makers still, seen as wielding near-divine skill. Reflecting on this, you might wonder how the legacy of these smiths shapes our world. The transition from bronze to iron laid the groundwork for technological advances that fueled later Greek city-states and, eventually, modern metallurgy. The Cyclopean myths remind us of the awe inspired by those who transformed raw materials into tools of survival-acquired heroism in mundane labor. Today, from skyscrapers to microchips, we owe much to those ancient forges. But what happens when a society's foundations crumble, and its craftsmen must forge a new path in the dark? Golden chariots of the gods, Mycenaean engineering and ceremonial vehiclaces. You walk through the rugged hills of Mycenaean Greece around 1500 BCE. Imagine the faint creak of wooden wheels and the glint of polished bronze under a blazing sun. In this Bronze Age world, chariots were more than mere vehicles. They were symbols of power, prestige, and divine favor. Their craftsmanship a testament to the ingenuity of a civilization that revered both war and ritual. The myths of golden chariots, like those said to carry gods across the heavens in Homeric tales, were rooted in the real-world work of Mycenaean artisans who built these vehicles with meticulous care. These chariots, though often overshadowed by tales of heroes, were the unsung marvels that shaped both battlefields and ceremonies. Their construction a quiet but profound act of engineering. Archaeological discoveries at sites like Mycenae and Knossos reveal the complexity of chariot making. Excavations have uncovered clay tablets in Linear B, detailing inventories of chariot parts, wheels, axles, and bronze fittings allocated to workshops near palatial centers. Picture a craftsman, his hands rough from shaping olive wood, assembling a chariot frame in a dusty courtyard. The process was painstaking. Timber was seasoned for years to prevent warping, then cut into precise shapes using bronze saws and adzes. Wheels, often made of ash or elm, were fitted with leather tires, sometimes reinforced with bronze bands for durability. A single chariot could take months to complete, each component tested to withstand the jolting terrain of the Peloponnese. These vehicles served dual purposes, war and ceremony. In battle, chariots carried elite warriors, their speed and mobility crucial for outflanking enemies. A fresco from Pylos, dated to 1350 BCE, depicts a chariot with a warrior wielding a spear, its frame adorned with inlaid ivory, functional yet ostentatious. You can imagine the scene: a commander, clad in bronze armor, racing across a plain, dust rising as his driver navigates rocky ground. In ceremonies, chariots were even more elaborate. Grave goods from Mycenaean tombs include miniature chariot, models in gold and faience, suggesting their use in processions honoring gods or kings. These ceremonial vehicles, often drawn by horses draped in dyed wool, rolled through festivals, their bronze fittings gleaming like the divine chariots of Apollo or Artemis in later myths. The artisans who built these chariots were highly skilled, but rarely celebrated. Linear B records list them as wheelwrights or bronze workers, receiving rations of barley and figs for their labor. Their workshops, often adjacent to palaces, buzzed with activity. One craftsman carving spokes, another hammering. Bronze plates to reinforce axles. The chariot's designs were practical yet symbolic, their high sides and sturdy frames reflecting both engineering precision and the Mycenaeans' obsession with order and status. A chariot's completion was a communal effort involving carpenters, smiths, and leather workers, each contributing to a vehicle that could mean victory in war or divine approval in ritual. Yet, as the Mycenaean world flourished, its reliance on chariots revealed vulnerabilities. Maintaining these vehicles required vast resources: timber, bronze, and skilled labor, all tied to fragile trade networks and palace economies. As the Bronze Age neared its twilight, what would happen when these resources dwindled and the wheels of these golden chariots began to falter? As you stand in the bustling courtyard of a Mycenaean palace around 1400 BCE, Imagine the rhythmic tapping of chisels and the low hum of artisans at work, their hands shaping the chariots that defined both warfare and worship in Bronze Age Greece. These vehicles, far from the fleeting glamour of myth, were feats of engineering, blending practical design with ceremonial splendor. The craftsmen who built them, laboring under the watchful eyes of palace overseers, wove together wood, bronze, and leather to create machines that carried warriors to battle and kings to divine rituals. Yet, their craft was as fragile as the society it served, tethered to the delicate threads of trade and labor that sustained the Mycenaean world. Archaeological finds at sites like Titaness and Dendra reveal the intricate process of chariot construction. Linear B tablets etched with meticulous inventories list components like four-spoked wheels and bronze-bound axles, alongside allocations of timber from nearby forests. Picture a wheelwright, his tunic dusted with sawdust, sanding a wheel's rim to ensure it rolled smoothly over rocky terrain. The wood, often oak or elm, was chosen for its resilience, soaked in water to bend into curves, then bound with raw hide that shrank as it dried, locking joints in place. Bronze fittings, cast in nearby forges, added strength and prestige. A chariot from a Knossos workshop, its axle capped with polished bronze, gleamed like the mythical vehicles of the gods. These fittings weren't just decorative, they reduced friction, allowing chariots to maneuver swiftly in battle or parade in warfare. Chariots were the elite's domain. A grave at Dendra, dated to 1450 BCE, contained a warrior buried with his chariot's bronze fittings, suggesting its role in his status. You can envision a charioteer gripping reins as his horses charged, the vehicle's lightweight frame often lined with woven reeds bouncing over uneven ground. These war chariots, carrying archers or spearmen, were tactical assets, used to harass enemy lines or transport commanders. In contrast, ceremonial chariots were spectacles of wealth. A fresco from Turin shows a procession with a chariot adorned with red and blue paint, its driver crowned with a boar tusk helmet. Such vehicles, used in funerals or festivals, carried priests or nobles through cheering crowds, their golden innies catching the sun as offerings to gods like Poseidon, whose cult revered horses. The artisans behind these chariots were skilled, but anonymous, their names rarely recorded beyond vague titles like chariot maker in palace records. Their workshops, often near stables, smelled of sweat, wood shavings, and molten bronze. A typical day might involve repairing a cracked axle for a warrior or polishing a ceremonial chariot for a festival, all while balancing demands from palace elites. These craftsmen relied on a network of laborers, woodcutters, tanners, and smiths whose contributions were equally vital. A single chariot required dozens of hands, from the boy gathering reeds for the floor to the smith hammering out bronze. Rivets but the Mycenaean world was fraying. Trade routes bringing tin from distant lands faltered under pirate raids, and timber supplies dwindled as forests were over-harvested. By 1300 BCE, palace economies strained to support the labor-intensive craft of chariot making. As workshops slowed, what would become of these chariots and the artisans who built them when the Bronze Age's golden age began to crumble? As you stand amid the fading echoes of a Mycenaean workshop around 1200 BCE, imagine the creak of a half-finished chariot frame, its wheels still and silent under a sky heavy with omens. The Bronze Age world that once celebrated these vehicles as symbols of power and divine favor now faced collapse, its palaces crumbling under the weight of invasions, droughts, and broken trade routes. The artisans who crafted these chariots, those intricate blends of wood, bronze, and ambition, found their skills tested as the Mycenaean civilization unraveled. In this final section, you'll witness how these craftsmen and their creations weathered the storm, leaving a legacy that rolled into later Greek culture and beyond. The Bronze Age collapse, spanning 1200 to 1100 BCE, was a cataclysm that silenced workshops across Greece. Archaeological evidence from Mycenae and Pylos reveals charred beams and shattered chariot parts buried under layers of ash. The Sea Peoples, enigmatic raiders from across the Mediterranean, disrupted the flow of tin and copper, starving forges and workshops. You can picture a wheelwright, his tools idle, salvaging bronze fittings from a broken chariot to craft a simple sickle. As palace scribes ceased their meticulous Linear B records, tablets from Knossos, some of the last before the fall, list dwindling supplies, 2 wheels, damaged or bronze for 1 axle. These fragments tell of a society prioritizing survival over splendor, with chariots once the pride of warriors and priests relegated to scrap. Yet, the spirit of these artisans endured. In scattered settlements like Lefkandi, where small communities clung to life in the early Iron Age, evidence of chariot making persisted. A burial from 1050 BC included a terracotta chariot model, its crude form a shadow of Mycenaean grandeur, but proof that the craft survived. You might envision a craftsman now working in a makeshift shed, teaching his son to carve wheels from scavenged wood, adapting to a world without palaces. Iron, more abundant than bronze, began to replace it in tools, but chariots remained a symbol of status. A warrior's grave in Euboea, dated to 1000 BCE, contained iron will fittings, suggesting that these vehicles, though simpler, still carried cultural weight in ceremonies or small-scale skirmishes. The myths of divine chariots, like those of Helios or Apollo, also survived, carried by oral poets into the Dark Ages. In Homer's Iliad, composed centuries later, chariots race across battlefields, their golden imagery rooted in Mycenaean reality. These stories preserve the awe of the chariot maker's craft, blending their engineering with divine grandeur. The ceremonial chariots, once paraded in Mycenaean festivals, inspired later Greek rituals like the chariot races of the Olympic Games, founded in 776 BCE. Reflecting on this, you might consider how the chariot's legacy endures in our modern world. From the engineering of wheels to the spectacle of modern vehicles, the ingenuity of those Mycenaean artisans echoes in our technology and culture. Their resilience in the face of collapse speaks to the quiet heroism of craftsmanship, preserving knowledge through chaos. But what happens when the tools of progress, chariots, or their modern equivalents, outlive their makers, and how do we carry their legacy forward? Ominous portents in prophecy, the Delphic oracle's historical influence on decision-making is. You tread the rocky slopes of Mount Parnassus in ancient Greece, around 800 BCE. Imagine the scent of laurel leaves mingling with the crisp mountain air, guiding you toward the sanctuary of Delphi. Here, the Delphic oracle, revered as the voice of Apollo, held sway over kings, generals, and farmers alike, its cryptic pronouncements shaping the course of lives and empires. Yet, beneath the divine mystique, the oracle was a human institution, rooted in the mundane rituals and social structures of early Greek society. Its influence, often tied to the Titaness Themis in earlier myths, rested on the careful orchestration of prophecy, a process as bureaucratic as it was sacred, steering decisions from marriage disputes to wars through the power of ominous portents. Archaeological evidence from Delphi reveals a sanctuary that was both spiritual and practical. The site, established by the 9th century BCE, featured a modest stone temple, its altar surrounded by offerings, clay figurines, bronze tripods, and jars of honey left by petitioners seeking guidance. You can picture a weary traveler, perhaps a merchant from Corinth, climbing the sacred way, his cloak dusted with travel, to ask whether a sea voyage would bring profit or ruin. The Pythia, the oracle's priestess, sat on a tripod in the temple's adyton, inhaling fumes from a chasm, possibly ethylene gas, as geologists suggest, and delivering cryptic responses. These were interpreted by priests who recorded them on wax tablets or relayed them orally, their words carrying the weight of divine authority. The oracle's role was deeply embedded in daily life. Inscriptions from Delphi, dated to the 8th century BCE, document queries about land disputes, trade ventures, and even the best time to plant barley. A farmer might ask, "Will my harvest prosper?" only to receive a vague reply, "Trust the sun's path, but beware the shadow." Such ambiguity required interpretation, often shaped by the petitioner's circumstances or the priest's knowledge of local politics. The oracle's influence wasn't limited to the common folk. City-states sought its counsel for war and colonization. A clay tablet from 750 BCE records a query from Chalcis about founding a colony in Sicily, with the oracle advising caution due to stormy winds, a portent that likely saved lives. When storms later struck, the Delphic system was meticulously organized. Priests drawn from prominent families managed the sanctuary's operations, from scheduling consultations to maintaining its treasury. Excavations reveal storage rooms filled with votive offerings, catalogued with precision to fund temple upkeep. Women like the Pythia, chosen for their purity, were trained to channel Apollo's voice, their trance-like state a blend of ritual and natural phenomena. You might envision the Pythia, her face veiled, swaying as she spoke, while priests translated her words into hexameter verse, a poetic form that lent divine gravitas to mundane advice. This blend of theatre and bureaucracy made Delphi a hub of influence, its prophecies a careful balance of spiritual awe and practical counsel. Yet, as Delphi's fame grew, so did its challenges. The sanctuary's neutrality was tested by powerful city-states seeking to sway its pronouncements. How could the oracle maintain its divine impartiality when political pressures and bribes began to cloud its sacred fumes? As you linger on the sacred slopes of Delphi around 700 BCE, imagine the faint echo of chanting priests and the flicker of oil lamps illuminating the temple's stone walls. The Delphic oracle, revered as Apollo's mouthpiece, was no longer just a local shrine but a pan-Hellenic institution, drawing petitioners from across Greece and beyond. Its prophecies, rooted in the ancient traditions of Themis, shaped decisions that rippled through history, from the founding of colonies to the strategies of wars. Yet, beneath its divine aura, the oracle was a complex operation, blending ritual with politics. Its cryptic pronouncements shaped as much by human cunning as by sacred inspiration. In this section, you'll step deeper into the oracle's inner workings, where the line between divine will and mortal ambition blurred. Archaeological finds at Delphi reveal a sanctuary growing in wealth and influence. By the 7th century BCE, the temple's treasury brimmed with offerings, gold statuettes, bronze cauldrons, and ivory carvings donated by grateful petitioners or ambitious city-states. You can picture a noble from Athens, his chariot laden with gifts, offering a silver tripod to secure the oracle's favor before a campaign. The Pythia's pronouncements, delivered in a trance-like state, were carefully crafted. Inscriptions from the period describe her sitting above a chasm, chewing laurel leaves. Her words often incoherent until priests reshaped them into poetic hexameters. A surviving record from 680 BCE details a query from a Spartan general about a war against Mycenaean. The river will guide, but the spear must follow. This vague advice, interpreted as a call to secure a river crossing, led to a decisive victory. Cementing Delphi's reputation, the oracle's influence extended to everyday life. Farmers sought guidance on planting seasons, while merchants asked about trade routes. A clay tablet from 720 BCE records a Boeotian trader's query about a voyage to Crete, answered with a warning of crooked waves, prompting him to delay and avoid a storm. Such practical advice, grounded in priests' knowledge of weather patterns or trade networks, made the oracle indispensable. Yet, its role in major decisions was profound. The founding of colonies, like Cyrene in North Africa around 630 BCE, relied on Delphic approval. Excavations at Cyrene uncovered a stone stele thanking Apollo for a prophecy that promised fertile lands, guiding colonists to a new home. The priests, often from elite families, wielded significant power. They managed the sanctuary's finances, cataloging offerings with meticulous care, as evidenced by storage rooms filled with labeled jars. You might envision a priest, stylus in hand, recording a bronze shield's weight to fund temple repairs. The Pythia, typically an older woman chosen for her piety, was both revered and controlled, her trance-like state possibly induced by natural gases or ritual preparation. This blend of mysticism and organization ensured Delphi's authority, but it also invited manipulation. Wealthy city-states like Athens or Corinth offered lavish gifts, hoping to sway the oracle's words. A bronze inscription from 650 BCE hints at a dispute over a tainted offering, suggesting accusations of bribery. As Delphi's influence peaked, its neutrality faced growing threats. Powerful leaders sought to control its prophecies, while rival sanctuaries, like Dodona, competed for prestige. How could the oracle preserve its sacred authority when the ambitions of men began to overshadow the whispers of the gods? As you stand amidst the ancient stones of Delphi around 600 BCE, imagine the faint hum of pilgrims' prayers blending with the rustle of laurel branches in the mountain breeze. The Delphic oracle, once a humble shrine, now stands as a cornerstone of Greek civilization, its prophecies guiding decisions that shape cities, wars, and lives. Yet, the sacred institution, rooted in the divine legacy of Themis and Apollo, faces mounting pressures from political rivalries and human greed. In this final section, you'll witness how the oracle navigated these challenges, cementing its legacy while revealing the fragile balance between divine inspiration and mortal manipulation, a legacy that echoes in our modern quest for certainty in uncertain times. By the 6th century BCE, Delphi's influence was unparalleled. Archaeological evidence reveals a grander temple, rebuilt after a fire in 548 BCE. Its columns adorned with dedications from grateful city-states. You can picture a procession of envoys from Athens bearing a gold statue to thank the oracle for advising peace with Sparta, a decision that averted war. The Pythia's pronouncements, still delivered in trance-like states, shaped history's course. A famous example, recorded by Herodotus, involved King Croesus of Lydia, who in 560 BCE asked if he should attack Persia. The oracle's reply, "If you cross the river, a great empire will fall," was ambiguous, leading Croesus to invade and lose his own empire. Such cryptic responses, etched on stone or wax, highlight the oracle's power to influence through interpretation, not dictate. The oracle's role in daily life remained vital. Inscriptions from Delphi show queries from ordinary Greeks, a potter seeking advice on a kill's location, or a widow asking about remarriage. A tablet from 590 BCE records a farmer's question about drought, answered with a call to honor the river's flow, prompting irrigation improvements that saved his crops. These mundane consultations, grounded in priests' practical knowledge, sustained communities. Yet, the oracle's political influence was undeniable. During the First Sacred War 595 to 585 BCE, Delphi's priests rallied city-states to protect the sanctuary from Phocian control, securing its autonomy. Excavations uncovered bronze shields from this conflict, offerings of thanks for the oracle's guidance in victory. The sanctuary's operations were a marvel of organization. Priests managed a treasury swollen with gifts from silver coins to ivory carvings, catalogued in detailed ledgers found in storage rooms. The Pythia, often a woman past childbearing age, was revered but tightly controlled. Her selection a political act by elite families. You might envision her, veiled and solemn, speaking in riddles as priests shaped her words to balance divine mystique with diplomatic tact. Yet, accusations of corruption grew. A stone inscription from 570 BCE hints at a scandal involving a priest accepting bribes to favor Corinth's interests, threatening Delphi's neutrality. As Greece entered the classical era, the oracle's influence waned slightly, challenged by rational thought and new political systems. Yet, its legacy endured in the legal and philosophical traditions it inspired, from Athenian juries to Plato's musings on truth. Reflecting on this, you might wonder how we seek certainty today through data, experts, or intuition, and how we balance truth with ambition. The Delphic oracle, with its blend of faith and pragmatism, reminds us that guidance, whether divine or human, is only as strong as the wisdom interpreting it. What happens when we, like the Greeks, face ominous portents but lack the clarity to act? Ambush in the shadows, tactical warfare in ancient Greece echoing Cyclopean legends. You tread the rugged paths of ancient Greece, around 700 BCE. Imagine the rustle of olive trees masking the faint clink of bronze armor in the twilight. In this era, warfare was not just a clash of armies, but a craft of cunning. where ambushes and guerrilla tactics shaped the survival of city-states. These strategies, often steeped in the myths of monstrous Cyclops ambushing heroes in shadowy caves, as told in Homer's Odyssey, were grounded in the real-world ingenuity of Greek warriors. The rocky hills and narrow passes of the Peloponnese made open battles risky, so small-scale ambushes became a cornerstone of military life, their success hinging on the meticulous planning of ordinary men-farmers, shepherds, and craftsmen turned soldiers. Archaeological evidence from sites like Thermopylae and Corinth reveals the tools of these tactics. Excavations have uncovered bronze spearheads and sling stones, small but deadly weapons designed for surprise attacks. Picture a band of warriors, their faces smudged with dirt for camouflage, crouching in a ravine as they await a rival city's supply caravan. These men, often trained in local militias, used lightweight shields and short swords, ideal for quick strikes in rough terrain. A clay tablet from Pylos, dated to 750 BCE, lists watchers of the coast, likely scouts tasked with spotting invaders like the Sea Peoples whose raids had plagued Greece centuries earlier. These scouts, armed with slings and javelins, would signal their comrades to spring an ambush, cutting off enemies before they reached fortified walls. The myths of the Cyclops, with their brute strength and sudden attacks, mirrored these tactics. In oral tales, these one-eyed giants lurked in caves, striking unsuspecting travelers a reflection, perhaps, of the fear inspired by hidden warriors in Greece's wild landscapes. You can imagine a young soldier, his heart pounding, whispering tales of Cyclopean ambushes to bolster his courage before a raid. These stories weren't just folklore, they inspired real strategies. A bronze helmet from Argos, dented from battle, suggests close-quarters combat, where a sudden attack in a narrow pass could overwhelm a larger force. Such ambushes relied on knowledge of the land, every gully, every hidden trail passed down. Through generations of shepherds and hunters, the daily life of these warriors was far from heroic. Most were citizen soldiers, tending fields or flocks when not fighting. Training was practical, hurling stones, running across rocky slopes, or practicing with a spear in a village square. A pottery shard from Athens, inscribed with a training schedule, shows drills for night watchers, men taught to move silently under moonlight. Their diet, barley porridge, olives, and dried fish, kept them lean and resilient. But hunger was a constant threat, especially during campaigns. Ambushes were planned with care, often at dawn or dusk, when visibility was low. A surviving oral account, later recorded by Herodotus, describes a Theban raid on Plataea, where warriors hid in a grove, striking as their enemies watered horses at a stream. Yet, as city-states like Athens and Sparta grew, ambushes faced new challenges. Larger armies and fortified walls shifted warfare toward open battles, threatening the effectiveness of these shadowy tactics. How could these small-scale, Cyclopean-inspired strategies survive in an age of disciplined phalanxes and political rivalries? As you crouch in the twilight of a Greek hillside around 650 BCE, imagine the tense silence broken only by the chirp of crickets and the faint rustle of cloaks as warriors prepare an ambush. In this era, the rugged terrain of Greece shaped a style of warfare where cunning outmatched brute force, and the myths of Cyclopean ambushes giants, striking from hidden caves, echoed in the strategies of city-state militias. These tactics, honed by ordinary men turned warriors, relied on intimate knowledge of the land and meticulous coordination. Yet, as city-states like Athens and Sparta grew more powerful, the art of the ambush faced new pressures, caught between tradition and the rise of disciplined armies. Archaeological finds from sites like Olympia and Nemea reveal the tools and training behind these tactics. Excavations have uncovered caches of sling stones, polished for accuracy, and bronze daggers designed for close-quarters combat. Picture a small band of warriors, their bodies smeared with ash to blend into the dusk, waiting in a narrow pass to strike a rival's supply line. These men, often farmers or herders, were trained in local militias, practicing maneuvers in village clearings. A pottery fragment from Corinth, dated to 670 BCE, lists runners of the hills, likely scouts who memorized every ridge and gully to guide ambushes. Their weapons like javelins and short swords were crafted for speed, as evidenced by a bronze blade from Thebes, its edge still sharp enough to cut through leather armor. The Cyclopean myths fueled these strategies, blending fear with inspiration. In oral tales, the one-eyed giants ambushed heroes with brute force, a narrative that resonated with warriors hiding in olive groves or rocky outcrops. You can envision a young recruit clutching a sling, whispering stories of Polyphemus to steady his nerves before a raid. These myths weren't mere folklore, they shaped tactics. A stone inscription from Argos describes a 660 BCE ambush where Argive warriors, hidden in a ravine, routed a Spartan patrol by rolling boulders, a tactic straight from Cyclopean legend. Such ambushes relied on surprise and terrain exploiting narrow paths where larger forces faltered. A surviving account from Herodotus details a Boeotian raid on Megara, where warriors used a dry riverbed to approach unseen, striking at dawn to seize cattle and scatter defenders. Daily life for these warriors was grueling. When not fighting, they tended crops or livestock, their military training squeezed into evenings or festivals. A clay tablet from Sparta mentions rations of barley and dried figs for night guards, men who patrolled borders to prevent rival ambushes. Their training emphasized endurance, running across hills, practicing silent signals, or hurling stones at targets. You might picture a farmer, his hands calloused from plowing, now gripping a spear as he drills under starlight, preparing for a raid that could protect his village's harvest. These ambushes were planned with precision, often involving decoys like a lone goat to lure enemies into a trap. But the rise of the hoplite phalanx with its heavy armor and tight formations began to overshadow these tactics. By 650 BCE, city-states were investing in walled defenses and larger armies, reducing the need for guerrilla warfare. Could the art of the ambush, steeped in Cyclopean cunning, adapt to this new era of organized warfare, or would it fade into the shadows of legend as you stand in the fading light of a Greek valley around 600 BCE? Imagine the tension of warriors hidden among the rocks, their breath shallow as they await the signal to strike. The art of ambush, once a cornerstone of Greek warfare and steeped in the Cyclopean myths of sudden, monstrous attacks, now faces the dawn of a new era. The rise of the hoplite phalanx, with its disciplined rows of armored soldiers, has begun to dominate battlefields, challenging the relevance of these shadowy tactics. Yet, the legacy of these ambushes, born from the rugged terrain and the ingenuity of ordinary men, persists, shaping the strategies and stories of a changing Greece. In this final section, you'll see how these tactics adapted or faded and how their echo resonates in history. Archaeological evidence from sites like Marathon and Plataea reveals a shift in warfare. By 600 BCE, bronze breastplates and heavy shields found in warrior graves indicate the growing dominance of hoplite formations designed for open-field battles. Yet, ambushes didn't vanish entirely. A stone relief from Corinth, dated to 590 BCE, depicts warriors emerging from a forest to strike a supply line, suggesting that guerrilla tactics persisted in specific contexts. Picture a small band of Athenians, their cloaks blending with the dusk, targeting a Theban caravan to disrupt grain supplies. These raids, though less frequent, were vital for weaker city-states or during defensive campaigns, exploiting terrain to counter larger armies. The Cyclopean myths, with their tales of giants striking from hidden lairs, continued to inspire. In oral traditions, later recorded in works like Xenophon's Anabasis, small units used ambushes to outwit stronger foes, echoing the cunning of Polyphemus. A clay tablet from Sparta, circa 610 BCE, mentions shadow runners, likely elite. Scouts trained to strike at night, their tactics rooted in earlier militia practices. You might envision a young warrior, his sling tucked into his belt, memorizing a hillside's contours to lead a dawn raid, his confidence bolstered by tales of mythical ambushes. These tactics were practical. A surviving account from Thucydides describes a 625 BC ambush where Arcadian shepherds, using slings and javelins, propelled a Spartan advance by targeting stragglers in a narrow pass. The lives of these warriors remained arduous. Most were still citizen soldiers, balancing farm work with sporadic training. Excavations at Argos uncovered a bronze spearhead inscribed with a farmer's name, suggesting he fought only when called. Their diet barley bread, olives, and occasional goat meat sustained lean bodies suited for swift raids. Yet, the rise of professional armies and fortified cities reduced the need for such tactics. By the 5th century BCE, battles like Marathon for 90 BCE showcased phalanxes, where discipline trumped cunning. Ambushes became supplementary, used to harass or scout rather than decide conflicts. Reflecting on this, you might wonder how the legacy of these ambushes shapes our understanding of strategy today. From guerrilla warfare to modern special forces, the art of surprise, born in Greece's hills, endures. The Cyclopean myths remind us that even the mightiest can fall to clever tactics. But as warfare grows ever more technological, what becomes of the human ingenuity that once turned farmers into shadow warriors, striking from the dark? The verdict of fate. Judicial practices in archaic Greece inspired by the Mises. You walk through the dusty agora of an archaic Greek city around 700 BCE. Imagine the murmur of voices debating disputes under the shade of olive trees. In this world, justice was not dispensed in grand courthouses, but through communal gatherings, where the principles of Themis, the Titaness of divine order, guided the resolution of conflicts. Her influence, rooted in myth as a goddess who weighed the scales of fairness, shaped the early judicial practices of Greece, blending ritual with practicality. These systems, though less dramatic than epic battles, were the bedrock of social stability, ensuring that quarrels over land, debts, or honor didn't fracture fragile city-states. The verdict of fate, as Greeks saw it, was delivered through human voices, echoing Themis's somber authority. Archaeological evidence from sites like Athens and Draros reveals the simplicity of these. Early courts in Crete, a stone inscription from 650 BCE, one of the earliest known legal codes, outlines penalties for theft, a fine of twice the stolen goods' value, enforced by a council of elders. Picture a farmer, his hands rough from tilling, standing before a circle of bearded men, pleading his case after a neighbor stole his goats. These gatherings, often held in public spaces like the agora or near sanctuaries, relied on oral testimony and oaths sworn to Themis or Zeus. A clay tablet from Corinth, dated to 720 BCE, records a dispute over a vineyard's boundary, settled by measuring the land under oath. With Themis invoked to ensure truth, Themis's role as a divine arbiter was more than symbolic. Temples dedicated to her, though modest, served as neutral grounds for resolving conflicts. At Rhamnus, a small shrine to Themis contained offerings, pottery shards, and bronze pins left by litigants seeking her favor. You can envision a merchant, his tunic stained with sea salt, offering a clay figurine before presenting his case against a cheating partner. Priests often mediated, their authority lending weight to verdicts. In Sparta, at Gerousia, a council of elders judged cases from homicide to inheritance, their decisions seen as channeling Themis's impartiality. A bronze tablet from 700 BCE mentions a Spartan fined for assault. His penalty, barley rations redistributed to the poor, reflecting her ethos of balance. These judicial practices were deeply communal. Unlike modern courts, they were no professional. Lawyers, citizens spoke for themselves, often citing custom or divine will. A pottery fragment from Athens shows a sketch of a trial, with onlookers watching as two men argue over a debt, their gestures animated but restrained. Disputes were settled through fines, restitution, or public shaming, avoiding bloodshed that could spark feuds. Yet, the system wasn't flawless. Wealthy families, like the Eupatridae in Athens, often swayed verdicts, their influence threatening. Themis's ideal of fairness, a surviving oral account later recorded by Hesiod, describes a corrupt judge favoring a rich landowner, prompting cries for divine justice. As city-states grew, these informal systems strained under the weight of larger populations and complex disputes. Could Themis's principles of divine order hold firm as political power, and wealth began to tip the scales of justice? As you stand in the bustling agora of an archaic Greek city around 650 BCE, imagine the low hum of voices as citizens gather to settle disputes under the watchful gaze of Themis, the Titaness of divine order. Her principles of fairness etched into the collective conscience guided the judicial practices that kept fragile city-states from fracturing. These early courts, far from the grand institutions of later centuries, were communal affairs where farmers, merchants, and elders debated everything from stolen livestock to broken oaths. Yet, as Greece's city-states grew in power and complexity, the simple justice of Themis faced new pressures tested by ambition, inequality, and the limits of human impartiality. Archaeological evidence from sites like Sparta and Gortyn sheds light on these evolving systems. A stone inscription from Gortyn, dated to 640 BCE, details a legal code regulating inheritance, mandating equal shares for siblings to prevent family feuds. Picture a widow, her shawl worn thin, arguing before a council of elders to secure her son's share of a vineyard, invoking Themis's name to demand equity. These councils, often composed of respected men over 60, relied on oral traditions and divine oaths. A bronze tablet from Olympia, circa 660 BCE, records a dispute over a merchant's unpaid debt, settled by a sworn oath on a sacred altar, with Themis invoked to curse liars. Such rituals lent weight to verdicts, binding communities through shared belief in divine justice. Themis's influence was tangible in sacred spaces. At Delphi, her ancient oracle preceded Apollo's, and priests then mediated disputes, their rulings seen as divine. Excavations at the sanctuary uncovered clay votives, small figurines of scales, or swords offered by litigants seeking Themis's favor. You might envision a shepherd, his hands calloused from herding, presenting a pottery shard before asking priests to settle a grazing rights conflict. In Athens, the Areopagus, a hilltop council, judged serious crimes like homicide, its members claiming to channel Themis's impartiality. A pottery fragment from 670 BCE depicts such a trial, with elders seated in a semicircle, listening as a man defends himself against accusations of theft, his fate hanging on their verdict. Daily life for these judges and litigants was grounded in routine. Elders, often retired farmers or warriors, prepared for trials by consulting local customs, while litigants gathered witnesses, neighbors, or kin to bolster their claims. A surviving account from Hesiod's works and days describes a dispute over land where bribes tempted a judge to favor a wealthy claimant, highlighting the system's flaws. The poor, lacking influence, often relied on public opinion or divine appeals to sway outcomes. In Sparta, the Gerousia's verdicts were enforced by community pressure, with offenders shamed or fined in barley, as seen in a clay record of a man penalized for damaging a neighbor's cart. Yet, as city-states like Athens expanded, population growth and trade brought more complex disputes over maritime contracts, or citizenship rights that strained these informal systems. The rise of written laws, like those of Draros, hinted at a shift toward codification, challenging Themis's oral traditions. Could her divine principles adapt to a world where wealth and power increasingly shaped justice? Or would the scales tip toward corruption and unrest? As you linger in the agora of an archaic Greek city, around 600 BCE, imagine the weight of Themis's gaze settling over a crowd gathered to hear a verdict. The Titaness of divine order, whose principles once guided simple disputes among farmers and merchants, now watches as Greece's judicial systems strain under the pressures of growing city-states. The communal courts, rooted in her ethos of fairness, face challenges from rising wealth, political ambition, and the need for more structured laws. In this final section, you'll witness how these practices evolved, leaving a legacy that shaped the foundations of Western justice, while reflecting on whether Themis's ideals could endure in a world increasingly driven by power. By the 6th century BCE, judicial practices were becoming more formalized. In Athens, Solon's reforms of 594 BCE marked a turning point. introducing written laws to curb aristocratic corruption. A stone stele from the Agora inscribed with Solon's code outlines penalties for theft and debt, ensuring transparency. Picture a craftsman, his hands stained with clay, reading these laws aloud to neighbors. Relieved that Themis's balance was now etched in stone, these reforms empowered ordinary citizens, allowing them to appeal verdicts to larger assemblies. A pottery shard from 590 BCE shows a scene of such an assembly, with citizens casting pebbles to vote on a merchant's fine for shortchanging a customer, echoing Themis's call for communal fairness. In Sparta, the Gerousia continued to uphold strict discipline, but even there, change loomed. A bronze tablet from 610 BCE records a case where a young warrior was exiled for defying an elder's ruling, a punishment meant to reinforce social order. You might envision the accused standing stoic before the council, his fate sealed by Themis's principles, enforced through public shaming. Yet, Sparta's helots, the enslaved underclass, had no voice in these courts, exposing the limits of divine justice. Archaeological finds, like a clay votive from Themis's shrine at Rhamnus, suggest that even the marginalized offered prayers to her, hoping for equity that rarely came. Themis's sacred role persisted at sanctuaries like Delphi, where priests settled disputes with divine authority. A stone inscription from 580 BCE records a land dispute between two farmers, resolved by a priest invoking Themis to mandate equal division of a field. Such rulings, though small, prevented feuds that could destabilize communities. Yet, as city-states grew, so did accusations of bias. Wealthy families, like Athens' Alcmenids, were rumored to influence verdicts with gifts, as hinted in a fragmentary poem by Solon lamenting crooked judgments. The transition to written laws aimed to curb this, but enforcement remained uneven, especially for the poor as Greece moved into the classical era. Themis's legacy endured in the democratic courts of Athens, where juries of citizens judged cases, and in the philosophical debates of thinkers like Plato, who grappled with justice's nature. Reflecting on this, you might wonder how Themis's ideals resonate today. In our legal systems striving for impartiality amid inequality, her scales remind us that justice, though rooted in mundane disputes, is the foundation of stable societies. But what happens when fairness, like Themis herself, becomes a myth we invoke but struggle to uphold in the face of power and greed? Crafting myths underground, volcanic forges, and the Hephaestus Cyclops connectioners, you descend into the smoky depths of a Bronze Age forge around 1400 BCE. Imagine the roar of a furnace and the acrid tang of molten metal filling the air. In the volcanic landscapes of ancient Greece, particularly on islands like Lemnos and Thera, metalworkers toiled in workshops that seemed to pulse with otherworldly energy. These forges, where bronze was shaped into tools and weapons, inspired myths of Hephaestus, the god of craftsmanship, and his Cyclopean assistants, one-eyed giants who crafted divine artifacts beneath the earth. The connection between these myths and the real smiths was no mere fantasy. It was rooted in the awe-inspiring craft of metallurgy, a process so transformative it seemed divine in a world of stone and wood. Archaeological excavations at sites like Akrotiri on Thera revealed the sophistication of these forges. Clay crucibles, blackened by heat, and stone molds for casting bronze blades have been unearthed, alongside piles of slag glassy waste from smelting. Picture a smith, his face illuminated by the furnace's glow, pumping leather bellows to stoke a fire fueled by olive wood. The process was meticulous. Copper from Cyprus and tin from distant Anatolia were melted at precise temperatures, poured into molds to create axes, daggers, or ceremonial vessels. A bronze tripod from a Mycenaean tomb, dated to 1450 BCE, shows intricate hammerwork, its legs adorned with spiral patterns that took hours to craft, a skill so rare it was likened to divine creation. The myths of Hephaestus and the Cyclops were born from such scenes. On Lemnos, a volcanic island sacred to Hephaestus, natural gas vents and sulfur springs fueled tales of underground forges. You can envision villagers watching sparks fly from a smith's hammer at dusk, whispering, of one-eyed giants laboring in fiery caverns. In Hesiod's Theogony, the Cyclops forged Zeus's thunderbolts, a nod to the real smiths whose work armed warriors and adorned temples. A clay tablet from Knossos, inscribed in linear lists bronze allocations to fireworkers, likely smiths whose forges mirrored the mythical workshops of Hephaestus. These artisans were vital, crafting everything from plowshares to votive offerings, their labor sustaining both daily life and religious ritual. Yet, the smiths' lives were grueling. Workshops, often built near volcanic slopes for access to heat-retaining stone, were hot and hazardous. Excavations at Pylos revealed cramped workspaces littered with charcoal and broken tools, suggesting long hours in smoky conditions. Smiths, often low status despite their skill, relied on palace rations, barley, figs, and occasional wine as recorded in linear archives. A typical day involved smelting ore, hammering bronze and repairing tools, all under the scrutiny of overseers. Their craft demanded not just strength but precision, as a single flaw could ruin a sword or cauldron. As the Bronze Age thrived, these forges were the heartbeat of Mycenaean society. But as trade routes faltered and invasions loomed around 1200 BCE, the volcanic fires that inspired both myth and metalwork faced extinction. Could the smiths and the legends of Hephaestus and his Cyclops endure when the flames of their forges began to dim as you linger in the flickering light of a Mycenaean forge around 1300 BCE? Imagine the rhythmic clang of a hammer shaping molten bronze, its glow casting shadows that dance like spirits on the workshop's stone walls. In the volcanic regions of Greece, from Lemnos to Thera, smiths toiled in conditions that seemed to blur the line between mortal craft and divine creation. Their work, forging tools and weapons essential to Mycenaean life, fueled myths of Hephaestus, the god of metalwork, and his Cyclopean assistants, whose underground forges churned out artifacts of godly power. Yet, these smiths were ordinary men, their lives bound to the grueling realities of their craft and the fragile networks that supplied their materials. Archaeological finds at sites like Mycenae and Akrotiri reveal the complexity of their work. Excavations have uncovered clay tires pipes channeling air into furnaces, and bronze ingots marked with symbols tracing their origins to Cyprus or Anatolia. Picture a smith, his arms scarred from sparks, carefully mixing copper and tin to create a durable alloy, his eyes fixed on the furnace's glow to gauge its heat. A single misstep could crack a mold or waste precious metal, as evidenced by discarded slag heaps found near Pylos. Linear tablets from Knossos, dated to 1350 BCE, list smiths like Kuprios, son of Daedalus, receiving rations of barley and oil for crafting spearheads and cauldrons, their labor tightly controlled by palace overseers. The myths of Hephaestus and the Cyclops were deeply tied to these volcanic landscapes. Lemnos, with its steaming springs, was revered as Hephaestus's sacred isle, where villagers attributed earth tremors to his hammer. You might envision a young apprentice hauling charcoal to the forge, hearing tales of one-eyed giants crafting thunderbolts in subterranean lairs. These stories weren't mere fancy, they reflected the awe of a society witnessing raw ore transformed into gleaming bronze. A bronze mirror from a Mycenaean tomb, its surface polished to a sheen, shows the artistry involved hours of hammering and grinding to create a tool for both ritual and vanity. Such objects, often buried with elites, link the smith's craft to the divine. As if Hephaestus himself guided their hands, the smiths' lives were precarious, tethered to distant trade routes. The Uluburan shipwreck, dated to 1300 BCE, carried tons of copper and tin, but such shipments were vulnerable to storms and pirates. When supplies dwindled, smiths recycled broken tools, as seen in melted bronze lumps found at Turins. You can imagine a tense exchange, a smith pleading with a palace scribe for more tin, knowing a failed batch could mean hunger for his family. Socially, smiths were respected but marginal, their workshops often on settlement edges, surrounded by the stench of smoke and sweat. Their days were long, spent smelting, casting, and polishing, their health eroded by fumes and heat. As the Bronze Age neared its end, the Mycenaean world trembled. Earthquakes and invasions like those by the sea peoples, disrupted trade and razed palaces? Could the smiths, whose forges echoed the divine workshops of Hephaestus and the Cyclops, keep there? Fires burning in a collapsing world, prophetic whispers, superstitions, and augury in daily Greek life. Imagine yourself waking in the soft dawn light of ancient Athens, around the 5th century BCE. As the first rays filter through the modest clay tiles of your home, the air is still, cool, carrying the faint scent of olive groves and distant sea salt. You rise quietly, careful not to disturb the household gods represented by small terracotta figurines on a shelf near the hearth. Before stepping out to tend your fields or head to the agora, you pause at the threshold, listening intently. A bird's call echoes from the acacia tree outside, perhaps a swallow darting low, or a crow cawing thrice. In this moment, you feel the weight of the unseen world pressing upon your day. For in ancient Greece, every flutter of wings or unexpected sneeze could be a whisper from the gods, guiding or warning you through the mundane rhythms of life. This was the essence of augury and superstition in daily Greek existence. Not grand oracles consulted by kings, but the quiet, pervasive habits that shaped ordinary decisions. Augury, known to the Greeks as ornithomancy, involved interpreting the behavior of birds as divine messages. It wasn't reserved for priests or seers. Even a simple farmer like you might halt his plough if a flock of pigeons scattered unnaturally to the right, signifying favor from Zeus, or veered left, hinting at misfortune from lesser deities. The practice traced back to Homeric times, where heroes like Odysseus sought signs from eagles before battles, but in everyday life, it was far more prosaic. You might observe the direction of a bird's flight while drawing water from a well upward. Spirals promising prosperity, sudden dives foretelling loss. Specific birds carried their own law. The majestic eagle, messenger of Zeus, brought omens of victory or divine approval, while the owl, sacred to Athena yet often seen as a harbinger of death, might cause you to cancel a journey if it hooted. At dusk, these interpretations weren't haphazard. They followed unwritten rules passed down through generations, blending observation with ritual. You'd stand facing east, the direction of the rising sun and auspicious beginnings, dividing the sky into quadrants in your mind, much like the Romans later formalized in their templum system, but here in Greece, it was more intuitive, rooted in the landscape itself. A bird crossing from your right to left could bless a marriage proposal, while one appearing suddenly overhead might urge caution in trade dealings. Families taught children these signs early. A young boy herding goats on the hillsides of Attica would learn to note if ravens gathered in odd numbers, potentially signaling a poor harvest. This wasn't mere fancy, it influenced practical choices, like delaying a planting season or avoiding certain paths to market, fostering a sense of resilience amid uncertainty. In a world where droughts, plagues, or Persian invasions loomed, reading these portents offered a semblance of control, turning the chaos of nature into a dialogue with the immortals. Beyond birds, superstitions wove through the fabric of daily routines like threads in a loom. Sneezing, for instance, was profoundly prophetic. A single sneeze during conversation might affirm the truth of spoken words, as if the gods exhaled agreement through your body. Aristotle himself noted this in his writings, reflecting how even philosophers grappled with such beliefs. You'd respond with "live well," or invoke Zeus to ward off ill omens if it occurred at an inopportune time, like the start of a meal. Other signs abounded. Spilling wine at dinner could predict quarrelsome guests, while dreaming of serpents might forewarn betrayal, prompting you to consult a dream interpreter in the marketplace for a few obols. The left side carried a subtle dread. Entering a house left foot first invited discord, echoing the sinister connotations that lingered from these times. Herbs like bay leaves were burned not just for flavor, but to purify spaces from evil. Influences and mirrors or reflective pools were avoided at night lest they trap wandering spirits. In bustling city-states like Corinth or Sparta, these practices extended to communal life. Merchants in the agora might delay bartering if a blackbird perched nearby, interpreting it as a sign against unfair deals, while potters firing kilns watched for unnatural smoke patterns. believing they revealed Hephaestus's mood. Women weaving at home paused if a spider descended from the ceiling, seeing it as Arachne's echo warning of hubris. These weren't dramatic rituals but dull, repetitive acts that built societal stability, reinforcing bonds through shared vigilance. Yet, as philosophers like Plato began questioning such irrational fears in the academies, a tension simmered. Were these whispers truly divine, or mere shadows of human anxiety? As you go about your day under the watchful eyes of the gods, one wonders how these subtle omens might steer not just personal fates, but the course of entire cities, perhaps even igniting conflicts, or alliances based on a single misinterpreted flight. Picture yourself standing in the bustling agora of Thebes around 450 BCE. As the midday sun casts long shadows across the stalls, the air hums with the chatter of merchants hawking pottery, figs, and bronze tools. But your attention drifts to a small crowd gathered around an elderly seer, his gnarled hands clutching a staff as he interprets the flight of sparrows overhead. You've come to barter for grain, but a nagging unease from this morning's omen, a crow landing on your roof at dawn, has you lingering, hoping for clarity. In ancient Greece, such moments weren't mere distractions, they were the pulse of a society that wove augury and superstition into its very structure, guiding not just personal choices but the machinery of civic life. These practices, though repetitive and unremarkable to the modern eye, held a profound grip, shaping decisions from marriages to military campaigns with a quiet, relentless influence. The seer's art, while rooted in the same birdwatching habits you practiced at home, was a profession honed by years of observing nature's patterns. Unlike your intuitive glance at a pigeon's flight, professional augurs or mantis followed a disciplined craft, often inherited through families or taught in secretive guilds. They'd stand in open spaces, fields, hilltops, or temple courtyards, marking the sky into sacred zones much as you did facing east, but with greater precision. A hawk soaring in the northern quadrant might signal divine favor for a city's new law, while a sudden flock scattering southward could halt a planned voyage. These men, and occasionally women, were consulted before significant undertakings. A general might delay a march against Boeotia if the entrails of a sacrificed goat showed unusual markings, or a council might postpone a vote if lightning flickered unexpectedly, seen as Zeus's direct veto. Xenophon's Anabasis recounts how armies stalled for days over such signs, illustrating their weight in strategic planning. Yet, for you, a common citizen, the seer's role was less about grand prophecy and more about resolving daily uncertainties. Should you marry your daughter to the vintner's son, or sell your olives to that Corinthian trader? Beyond birds, other omens permeated civic life with a subtle insistence. The sudden barking of dogs during a festival could disrupt sacrifices, prompting priests to restart rituals to appease offended gods. In temples, priests scrutinized the flames of offerings. Steady, clear fires signaled divine acceptance, while sputtering or smoky ones suggested displeasure, perhaps delaying a community's plans for a new agora. These weren't abstract concerns, they dictated practical outcomes. A farmer might join a militia only after a seer confirmed favorable signs, ensuring his family's safety in his absence. Women, too, played a role, particularly in household rituals. Your wife might sprinkle salt across the threshold to ward off spirits, or hang garlic to deter the evil eye. Practices so routine they blended into daily chores like grinding barley or spinning wool. These acts fostered resilience, binding communities through shared belief in a world where the gods were ever present, their moods readable in the mundane. This reliance on omens, however, wasn't without friction. In Athens, the rise of rational thought, spearheaded by figures like Anaxagoras, began to challenge these traditions. Philosophers argued that natural phenomena like lightning or bird migrations were governed by physical laws, not divine whims. Yet, even they tread carefully. Socrates himself respected oracles, though he questioned their blind application. The tension between superstition and skepticism simmered in the streets you walked, evident in debates at symposia or muttered complaints when a seer's failed prediction led to a poor harvest. For every citizen who scoffed at a sneeze's portent, another doubled their offerings to Hermes before travel. hedging bets against fate. This duality shaped Greek society, balancing faith with inquiry, and it influenced even the most practical decisions: trade routes, alliances, or festival dates. As you leave the agora, the seer's words echo. The crow's landing was ambiguous, neither blessing nor curse. You wonder how such uncertainty might ripple outward, perhaps swaying a council's vote or a neighbor's loyalty in ways you can't yet foresee. You're back in your modest Athenian home, the evening of that same day in the 50 BCE. As the flickering oil lamp casts shadows on the plastered walls, the crow's ambiguous omen from dawn still lingers in your mind, unresolved despite the seer's vague assurances in the agora. You sit at a low wooden table, breaking bread with your family, but pause when a gust of wind rattles the shutters, an unbidden sign, perhaps, of restless spirits or divine attention. In ancient Greece, this moment encapsulates the culmination of augury and superstition's role, not in dramatic oracles or battlefield prophecies, but in the quiet, persistent ways these beliefs resolved daily uncertainties, shaped communal bonds, and left an indelible mark on history. The seemingly trivial act of reading omens, from a bird's flight to a spilled cup of wine, was a cornerstone of resilience, guiding you and your neighbors through life's unpredictability with a sense of divine order. The resolution of these practices lay not in grand revelations, but in their integration into the fabric of Greek society, creating stability amid chaos. By now, you've decided to heed the crow's ambiguity cautiously, choosing to delay a trade deal with that Corinthian merchant until a clearer sign, like a dove circling your olive tree, emerges. This wasn't cowardice, but pragmatism. Superstitions provided a framework for decision-making in a world where harvests failed, ships sank, or plagues struck without warning. Communities leaned on these shared rituals to navigate risks, from farmers pooling resources after unfavorable omens to city councils timing public works around auspicious signs. Herodotus notes how Athenians delayed a fleet's departure after an eclipse, a decision that preserved ships from a storm, illustrating how omens, however boring, could sway survival strategies. For you, the daily act of checking the sky or blessing a sneeze reinforced a collective vigilance, knitting households into a resilient whole. Women's roles were crucial here, too. Your sister might lead a household rite to Hestia, burning laurel to cleanse lingering omens, ensuring the family's harmony aligned with divine will. Yet, the climax of this story isn't a single event, but a slow, cultural shift. As Athens' golden age unfolded, the rise of philosophy began eroding these traditions. Thinkers like Plato mocked blind reliance on augury, urging reason over ritual, while sophists questioned whether gods cared about human sneezes or sparrows. Still, the masses clung to these habits, and even skeptics hedged their bets. Aristotle kept a dream journal, wary of prophetic visions. This tension birthed a legacy. The Greek impulse to question omens laid seeds for scientific inquiry, yet their persistence in daily life preserved social cohesion. Festivals, marriages, and markets continued to pivot on signs. From owl sightings blessing Athenian debates to thunder-halting Spartan drills, these practices didn't just shape personal lives. They influenced city-state policies, delaying wars, or sparking alliances based on a seer's word. The impact reverberates today. Modern superstitions avoiding black cats, knocking on Woodeko Greece's obsession with signs, a testament to how deeply these habits rooted themselves. More profoundly, the Greek balance of faith and skepticism shaped Western thought, blending mysticism with logic. As you snuff out the lamp, the wind's rattle fades, leaving you to ponder. Perhaps the gods' whispers were less about divine truth, and more about humanity's need to find meaning in the mundane, a need that persists in our own rituals and routines. Chariot wheels of destiny. From battlefield innovations to Olympic traditions, picture yourself standing on the dusty plains of Boeotia around 1200 BCE, as the sun glints off the bronze fittings of a Mycenaean chariot rattling past. The creak of wooden wheels and the snort of horses fill the air, blending with the shouts of warriors preparing for a skirmish. You're a humble wheelwright, tasked with maintaining these vital machines, your hands calloused from shaping oak spokes and binding them with raw hide. In ancient Greece, the chariot was more than a vehicle. It was a symbol of power, a tool of war, and later a cornerstone of cultural spectacle. Its evolution from a clunky battlefield innovation to the sleek racing machines of the Olympic Games reveals a story of human ingenuity and resilience, woven through the mundane details of craftsmanship and competition that shaped Greek society. In the Bronze Age, chariots were the pinnacle of military technology introduced to the Greeks likely through contact with Near Eastern cultures like the Hittites. You'd marvel at their construction, a lightweight wooden frame, often willow or elm, lashed with leather to absorb shocks, mounted onto spoked wheels for speed. These weren't the lumbering carts of farmers, but precision instruments designed for agility on rugged terrain. A nobleman or warrior, clad in bronze armor, would stand beside a driver, hurling javelins or brandishing a spear as horses charged. The Iliad describes such scenes, with heroes like Hector riding chariots into battle, their wheels kicking up clouds of dust. As a wheelwright, your role was critical yet overlooked, ensuring axles didn't snap mid-charge or wheels didn't wobble, which could spell disaster for a warlord's campaign. You'd check the hubs, greased with animal fat, and test the spokes' tension, knowing a single flaw could topple a warrior's glory. This military chariot, though, was only the beginning. By the 8th century BCE, as city-states like Athens and Sparta emerged, chariots began transitioning from war to ritual and sport. You might travel to a festival in Argos, where nobles paraded chariots in honor of Hera, their polished bronze gleaming. As crowds cheered, these displays weren't just for show, they reinforced social hierarchies, with wealthier families showcasing superior craftsmanship, wheels inlaid with bone or ivory, axles reinforced with copper, the techniques you honed, like steaming wood to bend it or forging bronze fittings, spread through trade and conquest, linking Greek Peleus with distant lands. Potters in Corinth painted chariots on vases, immortalizing their form, while poets wove them into tales of divine contests like Apollo's solar chariot. The chariot's true cultural ascent came with the Olympic Games, formalized around 776 BCE. In the hippodrome, you'd see chariots stripped of military heft, built for speed with lighter frames and smaller wheels, pulled by teams of 2 or 4 horses. As a craftsman, you'd admire the subtle innovations: narrower axles for tighter turns, reinforced yokes to withstand the strain of racing. These races where brutal crashes were common, and dust clouds choked spectators, but they captivated Greece, drawing thousands to Olympia. Victors, often aristocratic sponsors rather than drivers, gained immortal fame, their names etched in oral histories. Yet, for you, the real story lies in the workshops, where anonymous artisans like yourself toiled to perfect these machines. Blending utility with artistry. As you watch a chariot thunder by, its driver leaning into a turn, you wonder, how would these vehicles, born in the chaos of war, come to define not just victory, but the very spirit of Greek competition? You're now in a bustling workshop in Corinth, around 700 BCE, the air thick with the scent of sawdust and molten bronze. As a wheelwright, you're shaping a chariot wheel, sanding the oak spoke smooth while a nearby smith hammers out a bronze axle cap. The rhythmic clink of metal and the low hum of artisans at work surround you, each contributing to a chariot destined not for war, but for the hippodrome at Olympia. The transition of the chariot from a tool of conquest to a centerpiece of Greek cultural life, particularly through the Olympic Games, is a tale of adaptation and craftsmanship. These vehicles, once symbols of martial might, now embody the competitive spirit of a civilization, their wheels carrying the weight of tradition, prestige, and subtle technological advancements that you and your fellow craftsmen quietly perfected. By the 8th century BCE, the chariot's role in warfare had waned as hoplite infantry tactics rose, but its cultural significance soared. You'd see chariots at festivals like the Panathenai in Athens, where they paraded in polished splendor, their frames adorned with painted motifs or inlaid with ivory from distant trade routes. These displays weren't mere pageantry, they showcased the wealth and ingenuity of city-states, with patrons commissioning ever lighter, faster designs. Your work was meticulous, selecting ash for its flexibility, steaming it to curve into perfect wheel rims, and binding joints with leather soaked in olive oil for durability. Pindar's odes later celebrated such craftsmanship, hinting at the unsung artisans behind the victor's glory. These chariots, built for speed rather than battle, required innovations: narrower axles for sharper turns, reinforced yokes to handle 4-horse teams, and wheels balanced to prevent wobbling at high speeds. You test each piece, spinning wheels to check their trueness, knowing a flaw could send a racer careening into the dust. The Olympic chariot races, held every few years, were the pinnacle of this evolution. You might journey to Olympia, standing among the crowd as thousands roared in the hippodrome, a long, oval track flanked by earthen banks. The races were grueling, up to 12 laps, with teams of 2 or 4 horses thundering around tight corners, often crashing in spectacular wrecks. The Iliad's funeral games for Patroclus described similar contests, but by now, the stakes were higher. Victory brought eternal fame, with poets like Simonides immortalizing winners in verse. Yet, the drivers, often skilled slaves or hired professionals, rarely claimed the laurel. Aristocratic sponsors took the glory, their wealth funding the horses and chariots. Your role as a craftsman was invisible but vital, ensuring the vehicle could withstand the strain of a 14-mile race. Archaeological finds, like chariot fragments from Olympia, reveal the precision of your work. Bronze fittings polished to reduce friction, wheels designed for minimal weight without sacrificing strength. This shift also reflected Greece's growing interconnectedness. You'd hear traders in the workshop discuss Egyptian or Phoenician techniques, like using lighter woods or alloyed metals, which you'd adapt to improve designs. Chariot racing became a cultural bridge with city-states like Syracuse and Cyrene, sending teams to Olympia, fostering alliances through shared spectacle. Yet, the sport wasn't without critics. Philosophers like Xenophanes decried its excess, arguing it glorified wealth over wisdom. Still, for you, the chariot's hum in the workshop was a steady rhythm, tying daily labor to a broader legacy of competition and craft. As you polish a wheel, you wonder, what would it mean for one of your chariots to carry a victor to glory? And how might these races shape not just fame, but the very identity of Greece? You stand in the packed hippodrome at Olympia, 688 BCE, the air thick with dust and the roar of thousands as the horses thunder past, their chariots' wheels a blur. As a wheelwright, your heart races not for the spectacle, but for the oak and bronze you crafted, now tested in this brutal race. The chariot, a descendant of Bronze Age war machines, has reached its zenith here, not in battle but in the Olympic Games, where it embodies Greece's competitive soul. This final chapter of its journey reveals how these vehicles, through the labor of artisans like you and the ambitions of aristocrats, wove a legacy of resilience and unity, their wheels turning the mundane into the monumental, shaping Greek identity and leaving echoes in modern sport and culture. The race's chaos, 12 laps, tight turns, and frequent crashes with drivers gripping reins as horses strain against yokes you helped design. Your work wheels balanced to perfection, axles polished to reduce drag, ensures the chariot holds under pressure. Victory here means more than a laurel crown, it's a city-state's pride, a sponsor's fame etched in stone. Pindar's later odes recount such triumphs, like Hieron of Syracuse's win in 476 BCE. But for you, the real triumph is the chariot's endurance, a testament to countless hours in Corinth's workshops. Archaeological evidence, like chariot fittings from Olympia's sanctuaries, shows the precision you achieved. Lightweight frames of ash, bronze hubs gleaming with polish, each detail refined over generations. These innovations, born from wars, demands now fuel a cultural phenomenon, drawing Greeks from distant colonies like Cyrene to cheer as one. Chariot racing did more than entertain. It knit a fragmented Greece together. City-states, often at odds, met on neutral ground at Olympia, their rivalries channeled into races rather than wars. You'd see Spartan and Athenian nobles, usually bitter foes, wagering on outcomes, their shared passion for chariots fostering fragile alliances. The game's religious roots honoring Zeus lent races a sacred weight. with victories seen as divine favor. Yet, your role as a craftsman reveals the human side, the slow grind of sanding spokes, the tri-land era of alloying bronze, the quiet pride when a chariot survives a race unscathed. These efforts, though dull, were the backbone of the spectacle, enabling aristocrats to claim glory while artisans like you remained in the shadows. Even the horses, bred for speed in Themis plains, owed their success to your yokes and harnesses designed to maximize power without breaking. The chariot's legacy outlasted its Olympic heyday. As Greece entered the classical age, racing declined hoplite warfare and democratic ideals overshadowed aristocratic displays. But the game spirit endured. The Roman circus races, like those in the Circus Maximus, borrowed Greek chariot designs, and modern sports echo the competitive drive you witnessed. The teamwork between craftsmen, drivers, and sponsors prefigured today's collaborative endeavors from engineering to athletics. Even the word arena, rooted in the sand-strewn tracks you knew, carries this history. The chariot's evolution from battlefield to hippodrome mirrors humanity's knack for turning tools of war into symbols of unity, a lesson resonant in our own quests for shared purpose. As the crowd's cheers fade and a victor is crowned, you reflect, your wheels carried more than racers. They bore the weight of a civilization's aspiration, proving that even the humblest labor can steer the course of history. The somber Titaness, Themis in cosmic conflicts and societal stability. Imagine yourself in a quiet temple courtyard in Delphi around 600 BCE, where the air carries the faint scent of burning laurel and the distant murmur of pilgrims seeking the oracle's wisdom. You're a scribe, your reed pen scratching on papyrus as you record the day's offerings to Themis, the Titaness of divine law and order. Her statue looms before you, carved from marble, her serene gaze and balanced scales, a stark contrast to the chaotic myths of her origins. In ancient Greece, Themis was more than a deity. She was the embodiment of the unspoken rules that held society together, her influence woven into the mundane rhythms of justice, prophecy, and civic harmony. Her story, rooted in the cosmic battles of the gods and the daily lives of mortals like you, reveals how order emerged from disorder, shaping Greece through the quiet, enduring power of law and ritual. In the mythic past, Themis was a Titaness born of Gaia and Uranus, standing at the heart of the universe's earliest conflicts. Hesiod's Theogony places her among the first gods, a counselor to Zeus during the Titanomachy, the decade-long war where Olympians overthrew Titans. You'd hear priests recount how Themis, unlike her kin, sided with Zeus, her wisdom tempering his raw power. Her role wasn't flash and no lightning bolts or monstrous battles, but pivotal, advising on strategies that ensured victory and stability. Her scales symbolized fairness, not just in divine courts but in the mortal world you inhabit. Where a cult thrived in places like Athens and Thebes, temples to Themis were modest, often simple altars in civic spaces, yet they drew magistrates and citizens seeking guidance on disputes over land or trade. As a scribe, you'd record their offerings: barley, wine, or small figurines, each act reinforcing Themis's role as the glue of communal life. Her influence extended to prophecy, tying her to Delphi long before Apollo claimed it. You'd note pilgrims whispering that Themis once spoke through the oracle, her cryptic words guiding city-states through crises. Unlike Apollo's dramatic pronouncements, her oracles were practical, urging restraint or compromise advice that averted wars or settled feuds. In daily life, her presence was felt in the nomoi, the unwritten customs governing everything from marriage contracts to marketplace ethics. You'd see merchants in the agora invoke Themis before sealing deals, swearing oaths by her name to ensure honesty, their voices low but fervent. Even in your work, copying legal decrees or festival schedules, you'd sense her shadow, her principles shaping the rhythm of polis life. Women, too, revered her, praying at household shrines for harmony in families, their quiet rituals echoing Themis's cosmic role in balancing chaos. This wasn't abstract theology, but a lived reality. In a Greece of rival city-states, where vendettas or droughts could unravel communities, Themis's ideals, fairness, order, restraint were survival tools. You'd hear of magistrates consulting her priests before trials, ensuring verdicts aligned with divine will, yet her worship wasn't without tension. Some scoffed at her oracles as vague, favoring Apollo's flashier prophecies. Others, like early philosophers, began questioning divine law itself, sowing seeds of doubt about her authority. As you pause, the temple's stillness broken by a pilgrim's prayer, you wonder, how did Themis's quiet guidance shape not just temples and trials, but the very soul of Greece's emerging democracies? You're seated in the Agora of Athens, around 550 BCE, your scribe's tablet resting on your knees as you observe a heated dispute over a land boundary. To farmers, their voice is sharp. Appeal to a magistrate who stands before a small altar to Themis, its stone worn smooth by years. Of offerings, you note the ritual, a libation of wine poured to the Titaness, a prayer for clarity, and the magistrate's measured ruling, invoking her name to lend weight to his decision. This scene, repeated across Greece's city-states, underscores Themis's role as the quiet architect of societal stability, her influence seeping into the daily mechanisms of justice and governance. Far from the cosmic battles of her mythic past, Themis's legacy now shapes the mundane yet critical systems that keep communities like yours intact, balancing human passions with divine order. Themis's presence in civic life was profound, her principles anchoring the nomoi customary laws that govern behavior. Before written codes emerged, as a scribe, you'd record how magistrates, like the one before you, relied on her divine authority to settle disputes, from inheritance squabbles to trade fraud. These weren't grand trials, but the everyday glue of society. A farmer claiming a neighbor's olive tree encroached his plot, or a merchant accusing another of shortchanging a grain deal. Themis's scales, symbolizing fairness, were invoked in oaths sworn by both parties, their hands raised toward her altar to ensure truth. Her cult sites, like the one in Athens near the Acropolis or at Nemea, were modest compared to Apollo's. Gleaming temples, yet they were vital hubs where citizens sought resolution. You'd see women, too, bringing offerings, loaves of bread or woven ribbons, praying for family harmony or just childbirth. Believing Themis's order extended to the hearth. Her prophetic role, though fading, still lingered. At Delphi, where you work, priests whispered of Themis's ancient oracles, once guiding kings to found colonies or avoid wars. By now, Apollo dominated, but her influence persisted in the measured tone of oracular advice, urging restraint over rashness. You'd hear of city councils consulting seers before laws were passed, ensuring Themis's blessing on decisions like building new walls or taxing trade. Herodotus recounts how such guidance shaped outcomes, like Croesus's missteps with oracles, showing even flawed interpretations carried weight. For you, copying these decrees, her presence is a quiet rhythm, ensuring stability in a Greece prone to feuds and factionalism. Her ideals fostered resilience, encouraging compromise over conflict, as when rival clans in Thebes settled blood feuds under her auspices. Yet, Themis's influence faced challenges. As Athens leaned toward democracy, figures like Solon began codifying laws, shifting reliance from divine custom to human reason. You'd overhear philosophers in the Agora, like Anaximander, questioning whether divine order was needed when logic could suffice. These debates, though esoteric, stirred unease among traditionalists who clung to Themis's rituals. Even you, a scribe, feel the tension. Your records now include written laws alongside sacred oaths, blending old and new. Themis's role as Zeus's counselor in myth, tempering his impulsive decrees, mirrored her mortal legacy, guiding societies toward balance without fanfare. As the magistrate's ruling settles the farmer's dispute, you wonder, how would Themis's quiet authority endure as Greece's new ideas of justice and democracy reshape the very foundations she helped build? You're back in the temple courtyard at Delphi, around 500 BCE, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the stone altar to Themis. Your scribe's tablet is heavy with notes from the day's preceding, oaths recorded, disputes resolved, and prayers transcribed for pilgrims seeking the Titaness's guidance. Themis, once a cosmic force in the midst of divine rebellion, has become the quiet heartbeat of Greece's civic life, her principles of order and fairness anchoring a society on the cusp of transformation. This final chapter reveals how her influence through mundane rituals and legal customs not only resolved conflicts but also laid the groundwork for democracy, leaving a legacy that resonates in modern concepts of justice and balance. Themis's role in daily life reached its peak as Greece's city-states matured. In Athens, you'd see her invoked in the bull, the council where citizens debated laws, their decisions prefaced by prayers to her for impartiality. Her scales, a symbol of equilibrium, inspired the eunomia good order that underpinned early democratic reforms. Solon's laws, etched in stone around 594 BCE, owed much to Themis's spirit, emphasizing fairness over aristocratic whim. You'd record how magistrates, before judging cases, poured libations at her altars, ensuring verdicts aligned with divine justice. These weren't grand gestures but routine acts, like the oaths you scribbled down, sworn by farmers or traders, to settle debts or boundary disputes. In households, women maintained her influence, offering honey cakes at hearths to secure domestic harmony, their prayers echoing Themis's mythic role as a mediator between gods. This quiet resilience resolving conflicts through ritual and reason kept Greece's fractious Rebellious from unraveling, fostering stability amid rivalries. Her prophetic legacy, though overshadowed by Apollo, still shaped civic decisions. You'd hear whispers of her oracles guiding colonies like Cyrene to thrive, or warning Sparta against hasty wars. These pronouncements, preserved in temple records, Eucopy emphasized restraint, a hallmark of Themis's wisdom. Yet, her influence wasn't unchallenged. Philosophers like Plato, debating in Athens' shaded groves, questioned divine law's role in human affairs, advocating logic over ritual. You'd note the tension in your records. Traditionalists clung to Themis's altars, while reformers pushed written codes, diminishing her oracle's sway. Still, even skeptics respected her ethos. Aristotle's Nicomachean ethics echoes her balance, seeking a mean in justice. This blending of divine and human law was Themis's triumph, her principles enduring as oral customs gave way to inscribed statutes. Themis's legacy stretched beyond Greece. Her scales prefigured Rome's justitia, and her emphasis on fairness influenced Western legal traditions. Today's courtrooms, with their oaths and impartial judges, carry faint echoes of her altars where you scribbled pleas for justice. Her role in fostering compromise over conflict resonates in modern mediation, where balance, not victory, is the goal. Themis's story, though rooted in the dull routines of scribes and magistrates, reveals humanity's knack for finding order in chaos, a lesson as vital now as it was in your time. As you set down your pen, the temple's silent save for the crackle of an offering's flame, you reflect. Themis's quiet guidance built not just laws but the very idea of justice, proving that even the humblest rituals can shape the course of civilizations. Walls built by giants, Cyclopean masonry in Mycenaean fortification. Spiker yourself, standing on a rocky hill in Mycenae around 1300 BCE, the late afternoon sun warming the massive stone blocks beneath your feet. You're a laborer, your hands rough from hauling limestone, part of a team tasked with building the towering walls that encircle this citadel. These are no ordinary walls, they're stones, some weighing as much as 10 oxen, are so vast that later Greeks will whisper they were laid by Cyclops, the one-eyed giants of myth. Known as Cyclopean masonry, this technique defined Mycenaean strongholds like Mycenae, Titaness, and Gla. Their imposing structures a testament to human endurance and ingenuity. In the daily grind of quarrying, hauling, and fitting these stones, you're part of a story of resilience, where ordinary laborers like you built fortifications that shaped Greece's Bronze Age, and left a legacy of all that endures in whispered tales. Cyclopean masonry was a marvel of practical engineering, born from necessity in a world of raids and rivalries. The Mycenaeans, thriving from 1600 to 1100 BCE, needed defenses for their palaces and trade hubs. You'd work alongside dozens, using wooden rollers and ramps to maneuver boulders from nearby quarries. each stone chosen for its raw strength rather than precise shape. Unlike later Greek temples with their polished columns, these walls were rough with massive, irregularly shaped limestone or conglomerate blocks stacked without mortar, their sheer weight ensuring stability. Pausanias, centuries later, described Mycenaean walls as superhuman, noting their enduring presence. As you wedge smaller stones, called chinkers, into gaps to level the structure, you're struck by the scale. Some blocks are 6 meters long, dwarfing the men around you. Your tools are simple bronze chisels, levers, and muscle, but the result is monumental, protecting the city from invaders and earthquakes alike. This labor wasn't just about defense. It was a social act, binding communities through shared effort. You'd hear chants as teams heaved stones into place, the rhythm easing the back-breaking work. Villages supplied workers, food, and timber, tying rural life to the citadel's grandeur. Women, too, played roles, weaving baskets to carry earth or cooking barley porridge for laborers. The walls, like those at Titaness with their 10-meter-thick foundations, symbolized Mycenaean power, intimidating rivals and securing trade routes for goods like olive oil and pottery, which reached as far as Egypt. Archaeological finds pottery, sherds, tools reveal the scale of these projects, with hundreds toiling for years. Yet, the work was grueling. A misstep could crush a foot, and winter slowed progress, testing your endurance. The mythic Cyclops, credited by later Greeks for these walls, reflect the awe they inspired. You'd overhear elders tell tales of giants aiding King Agamemnon, blending human labor with divine mystique. These stories, passed down to Homer's time, gave the walls a sacred aura, linking them to gods like Poseidon, said to favor Titaness. Yet, you know the truth, no giants, just sweat and skill. Still, as philosophers like Thales later questioned such myths, the walls stood firm, their practical genius undeniable. As you pause, wiping sweat from your brow, the half-finished wall looms above. You wonder, how would these stones, raised by human hands, shape not just Mycenaean's safety, but the very myths and identity of Greece? You're perched on a rocky outcrop near Titaness. Around 1250 BCE, the clatter of bronze tools echoing as you help lever a massive limestone block into place. The Cyclopean wall you're building stretches across the hill, its jagged stones interlocking like a puzzle, each one hauled from quarries miles away. As a laborer, your days are filled with the repetitive strain of dragging boulders, aligning them without mortar, and wedging smaller stones to stabilize the structure. The Mycenaean fortifications, like this one, are more than defenses. They're symbols of a civilization's strength, binding communities through shared toil and shaping a legacy that later Greeks will attribute to mythical giants. This slow, grueling work, though mundane, reveals the ingenuity and resilience that turned raw stone into enduring citadels. The construction of Cyclopean walls, seen at Mycenae, Titaness, and lesser-known sites like Glo, was a feat of collective effort and practical engineering. You'd work in teams, using ramps of packed earth and wooden rollers to move stones, some weighing over 10 tons. The blocks, often unhewn, were chosen for their natural shapes, fitted together with precision to withstand earthquakes, a frequent threat in the Peloponnese. Archaeological evidence, like the tool marks on Titaness' walls, shows the labor-intensive process, chiseling edges to ensure a snug fit, dragging stones with oxen or manpower, and building scaffolding to stack higher courses. Your role is small but critical, checking alignments with plumb lines, ensuring the wall's face remains even. The Lion Gate at Mycenae, with its iconic relief, required similar care, its massive lintel a testament to the skill you and your peers honed over years. This work knit communities together. You'd share meals of barley and lentils with laborers from nearby villages, their songs and stories easing the monotony. Women contributed by hauling water or weaving ropes for pulleys, their efforts as vital as the men's. These walls protected not just palaces, but entire economies. Trade routes carrying bronze, amber, and pottery depended on secure citadels. The walls' imposing presence, like Titaness' 15-meter-high ramparts, deterred raiders, ensuring Mycenae's dominance in the Aegean. Yet, the labor was relentless, accidents were common, and winters halted work, forcing you to shelter in makeshift camps. The Iliad hints at such fortifications, describing Troy's walls as God-built, a nod to the awe they inspired. You'd hear elders spin tales of Cyclops, their stories masking the human cost your blistered hands, the strain of your back. The wall's cultural impact grew with time. By the 8th century BCE, as Mycenaean power faded, their ruins became sacred sites. You'd see pilgrims leave offerings at Mycenae's gates, believing them divine. Polynians later marveled at their scale, unable to fathom human hands alone. Yet, as philosophers like Anaxagoras began questioning mythic origins, the wall's practical genius shone through earthquake-resistant. They stood when finer temples crumbled. This blend of myth and engineering defined Greece's early identity, tying mortal labor to divine narratives. As you set another stone, the wall's shadow lengthening, you wonder, how will these fortifications, born of sweat and stone, influence not just Mycenae's survival, but the stories Greece tells about its past? You're standing atop the completed Cyclopean wall of Mycenae around 1200 BCE, the wind carrying the scent of wild thyme as you survey the citadel below. Your hands, scarred from years of hauling limestone, rest on a massive block, its rough surface a testament to the labor that raised these fortifications. The walls, stretching around palaces and treasuries, stand as silent sentinels. They're immense. Stones a marvel that will outlast your lifetime and inspire tales of giants. This final chapter of Cyclopean masonry reveals how your toil, and that of countless others, not only secured Mycenaean power, but wove a legacy of resilience and myth, shaping Greece's identity and leaving echoes in modern engineering and storytelling. The wall's completion marked the zenith of Mycenaean strength. At Mycenae, Titaness and Gla, these fortifications, some 10 meters thick, guarded against invasions and symbolized dominance. You'd see the Lion Gate, its massive lintel perfectly balanced, welcoming traders from Crete or Egypt, their goods safe within your walls. Archaeological evidence, like the foundation stones still visible today, shows their durability. Built without mortar, they withstood earthquakes that toppled lesser structures. Your work ensured this, aligning boulders with levers, packing earth to stabilize ramps, and chanting with fellow laborers to synchronize efforts. This collective toil bound villages to the citadel, with families supplying grain or leather, women weaving ropes and children carrying water. The walls protected trade routes, enabling Mycenae to export pottery and import amber, tying Greece to a wider world. Yet, the cost was steep, broken bones, endless winters, and a quiet pride of work unseen by the kings you served. As Mycenaean power waned after 1100 BCE, the walls endured, becoming sacred relics. You'd hear pilgrims, centuries later, pray at Mycenae's gates, leaving offerings to honor the Cyclopean builders, giants in their tales. But you, in reality, Homer's Iliad echoes this awe, describing walls like Troy's as divine, while Polynians in the 2nd century CE marveled at their scale, unable to believe mere mortals raised them. This mythic aura, born from your labor, shaped Greece's sense of its past, blending human effort with divine narrative. Yet, the wall's practical genius shone through their earthquake resistance, achieved through precise stone fitting, inspired later Greek builders like those of classical Athens' long walls. Philosophers like Thales, questioning Cyclopean myths, still admired the engineering, a testament to human ingenuity over divine intervention. The legacy of Cyclopean masonry resonates today. Modern engineers study Mycenaean walls for their seismic resilience, a principle applied in earthquake-prone regions. The myth of the Cyclops, meanwhile, endures in literature and film, a nod to the awe you inspired. These walls, built through your sweat, show how ordinary labor can achieve the extraordinary, turning stone into symbols of strength and stories. They remind us that human resilience, not mythical giants, builds civilizations. A lesson echoed in today's collaborative projects, from skyscrapers to community defenses. As you gaze across Mycenae, the sun setting behind your walls, you reflect. These stones didn't just shelter a city, they carved a narrative of endurance, proving that even the humblest hands can build a legacy that towers over time. Golden relics of prophecy, funerary gold and ominous afterlife beliefs imagine yourself in a dimly lit chamber beneath a Mycenaean Tholos tomb, around 1400 BCE, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and cedar. You're a craftsman, your fingers, tracing the delicate edges of a golden mask, its surface hammered into the likeness of a noble's face. This is no ordinary adornment. It's a funerary offering, meant to honor the dead and guide them through the underworld, steeped in the ominous beliefs that shaped Mycenaean views of the afterlife. In ancient Greece, gold relics like these masks, diadems, and cups were more than treasures. They were talismans, reflecting a society's fears and hopes about death and eternity. Your work, meticulous and repetitive, weaves a story of resilience, where ordinary artisans crafted objects that bridged the mortal and divine, embedding prophecy and protection into the very metal you mold. In the Mycenaean world, death was a threshold fraught with uncertainty. You'd hear priests speak of the underworld, a shadowy realm ruled by Hades, where souls lingered unless properly equipped for their journey. Gold, rare and radiant, was believed to hold divine power, its gleam a beacon to guide the deceased or appease chthonic gods. The masks you craft, like those found in Mycenae's grave Circle A, were placed over the faces of elites, preserving their identity for eternity. You'd hammer thin gold sheets, using bronze tools to etch features, closed eyes, solemn mouths each, detail a prayer for safe passage. Other relics, like golden cups or jewelry, lined the tombs, their weight measured in offerings to deities like Persephone. Archaeological finds, such as the 16th century BCE Mask of Agamemnon, revealed the skill involved. Your hands shape metal no thicker than papyrus, yet it endures centuries. Your work is part of a broader ritual. Families brought offerings, olives, wine, or figurines to tombs, believing these ensured the dead's favor and prevented restless spirits from haunting the living. You'd see women weave linen shrouds, their chants invoking safe journeys, while men carved stone lintels for Tholos tombs, their beehive domes echoing cosmic order. These practices weren't mere superstition, they were survival strategies, binding communities through shared rites in a world where death was ever present due to disease or war. The Iliad hints at such beliefs, with Patroclus's ghost demanding burial rites, reflecting the fear that unappeased souls could curse the living. Your gold work, though tedious, was vital, a shield against such omens. The prophetic element of these relics lay in their perceived power to influence fate. You'd overhear mourners whisper that a well-crafted mask could sway Hades' judgment, securing a soul's peace. Oracles, consulted before burials, might dictate the number of gold leaves or the shape of a diadem, tying your craft to divine will. Yet, skepticism existed even then. Some questioned whether gold truly swayed gods, a murmur that grew louder in later centuries with philosophers like Xenophanes. As you polish a mask, its surface catching the torchlight, you wonder, how did these golden relics, born of your hands, shape not just the dead's journey, but the living's understanding of their place in the cosmos? You're in a cramped workshop in Pylos, around 1350 BCE, the air thick with the tang of heated bronze and the faint glow of a charcoal brazier. As a goldsmith, you're meticulously crafting a thin golden diadem, its surface etched with spirals that mimic the cosmos, destined for a noble's tomb. Your work is part of a larger Mycenaean ritual where funerary gold masks, cups, and jewelry serves as a bridge to the underworld, steeped in beliefs about death's mysteries. These relics, though crafted in the quiet monotony of your bench, carry the weight of a society's hopes and fears, binding communities through shared rites and prophetic aspiration. Your hammer's steady rhythm weaves a story of resilience, where ordinary artisans like you shape objects that defy mortality, influencing how the living navigate their fragile existence. The Mycenaeans believed the afterlife was a shadowy realm, accessible only through proper burial. You'd overhear priests in the palace courtyard, their voices low, instructing families to adorn the dead with gold to appease Hades or Persephone. Your diadems, like those found in Mycenae's shaft graves, were placed on the deceased's brow, their intricate patterned spirals, rosettes symbolizing eternal renewal. You'd use bronze tools to chase designs, your fingers steady despite the repetitive strain, knowing each piece must be flawless to honor the dead and protect the living. Archaeological finds, such as the gold cups from Vafio, show the sophistication of your craft. Vessels etched with bulls or warriors, meant to hold offerings for chthonic gods. These weren't mere decorations but talismans, believed to carry prophetic power. Gold's gleam could sway divine judgment, ensuring a soul's rest. Your work tied into a broader web of ritual. You'd see mourners process to Tholos' tombs, carrying your creations alongside pottery or linen, their chants echoing fears of restless spirits. Women played a key role, weaving shrouds or offering honey to appease the dead, while men carved stone slabs for grave entrances. These rites, described in Homer's Odyssey when Odysseus summons shades, were practical and buried souls could haunt villages, bringing drought or illness. Your gold, though costly, was a communal investment ensuring cosmic balance. Oracles often guided these rituals. You'd hear a seer dictate the shape of a golden leaf, claiming it reflected a vision of the deceased's fate. Such prophecies shaped burial practices, with families consulting Delphi or local seers to avoid divine wrath. Their offerings recorded in linear tablets you might glimpse in the palace archives. Yet, not all embraced these beliefs. You'd catch whispers of doubt, merchants questioning if gold truly influenced gods, or elders grumbling when oracles demanded lavish burials. These murmurs foreshadowed later skepticism from thinkers, like Anaxagoras, who saw death as natural, not divine. Still, your craft held sway, its repetitive precision a lifeline for a society facing war and plague. The gold you shaped didn't just adorn the dead, it reinforced communal bonds, as villages pooled resources for elite burials, hoping for blessings in return. As you set the finished diadem aside, its curves glinting, you wonder, how did these golden relics, crafted in obscurity, shape not just the afterlife's mysteries, but the living's fragile hope in an uncertain world? You're standing at the entrance of a Mycenaean Tholos tomb in Pylos, around 1300 BCE, as mourners lower a noble's body, adorned with your golden diadem, into the cool darkness. The flickering torchlight catches the gleam of your craftsmanship. Gold masks, cups, and rings, each piece a silent prayer for the deceased's journey through Hades' realm. Your work as a goldsmith, though repetitive and confined to a smoky workshop, culminates here, in rituals that weave the living and the dead into a shared narrative of survival. These funerary relics, steeped in ominous afterlife beliefs, didn't just honor the departed, they anchored a civilization's resilience, shaping how Mycenaeans faced mortality and leaving a legacy that echoes in modern rituals of remembrance. The burial completes a cycle of devotion and fear. You'd watch as priests pour wine over the tomb's entrance, chanting to Persephone to guide the soul, while your golden artifacts carefully placed around the body serve as talismans against the underworld's perils. The masks, like those in Mycenae's grave circle A, preserve the deceased's identity, their serene faces a plea for divine favor. Archaeological finds, such as the Vafio cups with their intricate scenes, reveal the stakes. Each relic, etched with care, was believed to carry prophetic weight, ensuring safe passage or appeasing restless gods. Families invested heavily, pooling resources to commission your work, not out of vanity but necessity. And honor dead could curse the living, bringing blight or discord. Homer's Odyssey, with its tales of shades demanding rites, mirrors this fear, showing how your craft protected entire communities. These rituals were communal lifelines. You'd see women weave shrouds, their songs blending grief with hope, while men sealed tombs with Cyclopean stones, their labor echoing yours. Oracles, consulted before burials, guided your designs. A seer might demand a gold leaf shaped like ivy, claiming it mirrored a divine vision. Linear tablets from Pylos record such offerings, listing gold alongside grain, tying your work to the palace economy. Yet, doubts lingered. You'd hear merchants mutter that gold was better spent on the living, a skepticism later echoed by philosophers like Xenophanes, who questioned divine intervention. Still, your relics held sway. They gleam a symbol of order in a world of war and plague. fostering unity as villages rallied around elite burials to curry divine favor. The legacy of Mycenaean funerary gold outlasted their civilization. As their palaces crumbled after 1100 BCE, the tombs endured, their treasures inspiring awe in later Greeks. Pausanias, visiting Mycenae centuries later, marveled at the graves, weaving tales of heroic wealth. Your artifacts shaped Greece's mythic identity, linking mortal craft to divine realms, while their craftsmanship influenced classical art, from gold jewelry to temple offerings. Today, these relics resonate in our own rituals, golden memorials, prayers for the dead reflecting humanity's enduring need to honor mortality. Your work, though obscure, proves that even small acts of creation can bridge life and death, weaving hope into the fabric of existence. As the tomb is sealed, your diadems glow, fading into darkness. You reflect, these golden relics didn't just guide the dead, they taught the living to find meaning in loss, a lesson that endures across millennia. The ambush of order, rebellions and uprisings modeled on mythical betrayals. Imagine yourself in a bustling agora in Thebes, around 379 BCE, the air sharp with the scent of olive oil and the murmur of traders. You're a scribe, your stylus poised over a wax tablet, recording whispers of unrest that ripple through the crowd. Thebes, under Spartan control, simmers with tension, and you've heard rumors of a plot to overthrow the oligarchs, inspired by tales of divine betrayals from Greece's mythic past. These rebellions, often sparked in the shadows of city-states, drew on stories of gods like Prometheus or mortals like Theseus defying tyrants, weaving myth into the gritty reality of uprisings. In the daily grind of your notes, you capture a story of resilience where ordinary citizens, fueled by ancient tales, challenged order to reshape their world, their acts echoing the betrayals that birthed the cosmos. In the late 5th and early 4th centuries BCE, Greece was a patchwork of rival polities, where power struggles often led to rebellion. You'd hear of Thebes' plot, led by figures like Pelopidas, aiming to oust Spartan-installed rulers. The conspirators, meeting in secret, drew inspiration from myths like the Titaness, where Zeus overthrew Cronus, or Prometheus' theft of fire, defying divine authority for mortal gain. These stories, told by poets in the agro or sung at festivals, weren't mere entertainment. They were blueprints for resistance. You'd note how rebels framed their cause as a divine mandate, casting oppressors as modern titans, their rule unjust. The Theban uprising, as Xenophon later described, began with a daring ambush assassins disguised as women infiltrating a banquet, a tactic echoing Odysseus' cunning in the Odyssey. Your role as a scribe places you at the heart of this tension. You'd record the whispers, citizens hoarding bronze daggers, orators invoking Theseus' defiance of Crete's Minotaur to rally support. These rebellions relied on community farmers, potters, and women like you who copied decrees or smuggled messages, all risked their lives. The myths gave courage. Prometheus' punishment, chained yet unbowed, mirrored the rebels' defiance despite Spartan reprisals. Archaeological finds, like graffiti in Thebes praising liberty, hint at the grassroots fervor you witness. Yet, these uprisings were mundane in execution meetings in taverns, coded signals via lamp flashes rooted in the daily life of Peleus. Where survival meant defying power imbalances, skepticism existed, too. You'd overhear elders warn that rebellion invited chaos, citing myths like Pandora's box, where defiance unleashed ruin. Philosophers like Plato, debating in Athens, questioned whether uprisings truly served justice or merely traded one tyrant for another. Still, the myth's pull was strong, framing rebellion as a sacred act. Not just politics. As you write, a cloaked figure slips a note into your hand, hinting at tonight's ambush. You wonder, how will these mythic echoes guiding humble rebels reshape not just Thebes, but the very idea of freedom in Greece? You're huddled in a dim tavern in Thebes, 379 BCE, the flicker of an oil lamp casting shadows on your wax tablet. As you scribble coded messages, the air hums with the low voices of conspirators, their plans for tonight's uprising against Spartan rule whispered in urgent tones. As a scribe, You're not just a recorder, but a silent ally, your notes passing vital details to rebels inspired by myths of betrayal like Prometheus stealing fire, or Theseus slaying the Minotaur. These stories, woven into the fabric of Greek life, fuel the rebellion, turning ordinary citizens into agents of change. The Theban plot, rooted in the mundane meetings in backrooms, daggers hidden in cloaks draws on these tales to challenge order, revealing how myths shaped not just courage but the strategy of uprisings. The rebellion's mechanics are gritty, far from mythic grandeur. You'd overhear Pelopidas and his conspirators plotting to assassinate the oligarchs at a banquet, their plan mirroring Odysseus's sly return to Ithaca. Xenophon's Hellenitza details the event. Rebels, disguised as women, infiltrate the feast, striking swiftly to reclaim Thebes. You'd note their preparation signals passed via market stalls. Weapons smuggled in grain sacks, each act acquired defiance rooted in daily life. Myths gave these acts weight. Orators invoked Zeus's overthrow of Cronus to cast the Spartans as unjust titans, rallying farmers and artisans to risk everything. Your tablet captures their fervor, a potter swearing to fight, inspired by Bellerophons. Triumph over the Chimera, or a woman hiding blades, echoing Athena's cunning aid to heroes. This uprising, like others across Greece, relied on community resilience. You'd see women weaving cloaks to disguise rebels, or shepherds guiding exiles through hills to join the fight. These weren't heroic deeds but practical ones, born from the same communal bonds that built temples or harvested olives. Archaeological evidence, like Theban inscriptions celebrating the victory, shows the uprising's grassroots nature. Ordinary citizens, not just elites, drove it. Myths unified them. Prometheus's suffering emboldened those facing Spartan reprisals, while Theseus's labyrinthine escape inspired cunning tactics. Yet, risks were real. Betrayal could lead to execution, and you'd feel the weight of each. Note you pass, knowing discovery means death. Doubt simmered, too. You'd hear merchants argue the rebellion risked chaos, citing myths like the hubris of Icarus, who flew too high. Philosophers like Isocrates, writing later, questioned whether such uprisings brought true justice or merely new tyrants. Still, the mythic framework held, giving rebels a narrative to justify their cause, blending divine betrayal with mortal struggle. Your role, though small, is vital. Your notes, passed in secret, help coordinate the ambush, tying you to a larger fight for liberty. As the tavern empties, rebels slipping into the night. You wonder, will this uprising, fueled by ancient tales, not only free Thebes but redefine what it means to challenge power in Greece? You're in Thebes' agora at dawn, 379 BCE. The air sharp with the aftermath of last night's uprising. Your tablet, now smudged with ash, records the triumph, the Spartan oligarchs slain, Thebes liberated by Pelopidas and his rebels. As a scribe, you've witnessed the rebellion's climax, its success fueled by myths of divine betrayal that inspired ordinary citizens to act. The streets hum with cautious celebration. Farmers, weavers, and potters who risked all now share tales of their victory, likening it to Zeus's triumph over the Titans. This uprising, rooted in the mundane courage of daily life, reshaped Thebes and set a precedent for Greece's fight for autonomy. Its legacy echoing in modern struggles for freedom. The rebellion's success was a communal feat. Xenophon's Hellenitza recounts how the conspirators, disguised as women, struck at the banquet, their plan executed with precision born from months of secret meetings you documented. Myths like Prometheus's defiance or Theseus's cunning gave rebels not just courage but a narrative to unify them. You'd see citizens, inspired by such tales, hide exiles or smuggle weapons, their actions as vital as the assassin's daggers. Women wove disguises, shepherds guided rebels through hills, and orators rallied crowds with stories of heroic betrayal, framing the Spartans as modern Cronuses. Archaeological finds like Theban victory stelae confirmed the uprising's broad support, with inscriptions praising liberty etched by hands like yours. This wasn't myth but gritty reality. Blood spilled, risks taken, all grounded in the daily bonds of polis life. The aftermath brought reflection. You'd hear jubilant Thebans invoke Athena's wisdom, crediting divine favor, yet some, like merchants wary of reprisals, cited Pandora's box, fearing chaos. Philosophers like Plato later debated the uprising's justice, warning that rebellion could breed instability, a tension you'd note in your records. Still, the mythic framework endured, shaping how Greece understood resistance. Thebes' victory inspired other Peleus, like Mycenaean, to challenge Spartan hegemony, paving the way for the Boeotian League's rise. Your notes, once secret, now join public decrees celebrating liberty, tying your quiet labor to a larger narrative. The legacy of these rebellions, fueled by myth, resonates today. The Theban uprising prefigured democratic ideals, showing how ordinary people, inspired by stories, could topple tyrants. Modern revolutions, from grassroots protests to liberation movements, echo this blend of narrative and action where tales of defiance galvanize change. The myths you recorded, Prometheus, Theseus, live on in literature and culture, symbols of resistance against unjust power. Your work, though humble, helped weave these stories into Greece's identity, proving that even the smallest acts, like a scribe's notes, can spark monumental shifts. As you set down your stylus, Thebes awakening around you, you reflect. These rebellions, born from mythic betrayals, didn't just free a city, they showed how stories can inspire resilience, a lesson that continues to shape the fight for freedom across time. Forged in fire, technological advancements in ancient metallurgy tied to Cyclops. Picture yourself in a smoky forge in Mycenaean around 1400 BCE. The air thick with the acrid scent of charcoal and molten bronze. You're a smith, your hands calloused from pounding glowing metal into a sword blade. Sparks flying as you work beneath the flickering light of a clay lamp. In the Mycenaean world, metallurgy was a craft of fire and sweat, its advancements tied to tales of the Cyclops, mythical one-eyed giants said to forge Zeus's thunderbolts. These stories, whispered by your fellow artisans, cast your labor as divine, yet the real work's melting ore, alloying metals, crafting tools was a grueling, practical art. Your forge, though humble, drives a story of resilience, where incremental innovations in bronze and early iron shaped Greece's power, from weapons to trade, leaving a legacy that echoes in both myth and metal. Metallurgy in the Bronze Age was a cornerstone of Mycenaean society, fueling its military and economic might. You'd smelt copper and tin, sourced from distant Cyprus or Anatolia, to create bronze harder than either metal alone for swords, daggers, and armor. The process was arduous. You'd stoke fires to 1000 degrees Celsius, using bellows to force air into clay furnaces, then pour molten bronze into molds. Archaeological finds, like the bronze swords from Mycenaean's shaft graves, show your crafts. Precision with blades balanced for thrusting or slashing. These weapons armed warriors like those in the Iliad, their edges honed by your hammer. Beyond war, you'd craft tools, plows, sickles supporting agriculture, or ornate pins traded as far as Egypt. Tying your forge to a wider world, the Cyclops myth, born in this era, gave your work a sacred aura. You'd hear tales of these giants forging divine weapons in volcanic caves, their single eye symbolizing the forge's glow. Hesiod's theogony links them to Hephaestus, god of smithing, and you'd feel pride as elders likened your sparks to their craft. These stories weren't mere fancy. They reflected the awe of a society seeing metal transform from ore to blade, a process as magical as it was technical. Your forge was a hub of community. Apprentices hauled ore, women wove bellows, and traders bartered for your goods, binding villages through shared labor. Yet, the work was perilous. A misstep could burn flesh or crack a mold, wasting days of effort. Skepticism existed, too. You'd overhear merchants question the Cyclops tales, arguing human skill, not giants, shaped bronze. Later philosophers like Anaxagoras would echo this, seeking natural explanations for your craft. Still, your innovation's stronger alloys, sharper blades drove Mycenaean dominance. Their impact felt in battles and markets. As you quench a blade, steam hissing. You wonder, how did your forge, blending myth and metal, shape not just weapons, but the very foundations of Greece's strength? You're deep in the heat of your Mycenaean forge, around 1300 BCE. sweat beading as you hammer a bronze spearhead, its edge sharpening with each blow. The Cyclops tales whispered by apprentices stoking the fire frame your work as divine, but the reality is relentless, mixing copper and tin, controlling furnace heat and perfecting molds. These metallurgical advancements, though born in the repetitive toil of your forge, transformed Mycenaean society, enabling stronger weapons, better tools, and wider trade. Your craft, tied to myths of one-eyed giants forging divine arms, bridges, the mundane and the legendary, revealing how incremental innovations in metalwork fueled Greece's power and shaped its cultural imagination. By now, metallurgy had evolved beyond simple bronze casting. You'd experiment with alloys, adding small amounts of lead to make bronze flow better in molds, or arsenic for harder edges as seen in daggers from Knossos. This wasn't guesswork. You'd learned from generations of smiths refining techniques through trial and error. Archaeological evidence, like the bronze ingots from Crete's shipwrecks, shows how your work relied on trade copper from Cyprus, tin from distant Anatolia linking your forge to a Mediterranean network. You'd craft not just weapons but plows and chisels, boosting agriculture and construction, or ornate jewelry for elites like the gold inlaid swords from Mycenaean tombs. These objects, described in the Iliad as gifts of gods, elevated your craft status even as your labor remained unseen. The Cyclops myth amplified this reverence. You'd hear stories of these giants crafting Hephaestus's tools in volcanic forges, their single eye mirroring the furnace's glow. These tales, rooted in the awe of smelting, gave your work a sacred edge. Villagers left offerings at your forge, believing it blessed by gods. Your workshop was a community hub. Women spun wool for bellows, boys hauled charcoal, and traders swapped tales of Hittite smithing techniques which you'd adapt, like annealing to strengthen bronze. Yet, the work was grueling. Burns were common, and a cracked mold meant starting over. Your innovations, though small, were vital. Better swords won battles, stronger plows fed cities, and traded goods built wealth. Skepticism grew, too. You'd overhear traders scoff at Cyclopean tales, crediting human skill over divine aid. A view later echoed by Thales, who saw metallurgy as science, not magic. Still, your craft shaped Mycenaean dominance, from arming warriors to equipping farmers. The transition to iron, just beginning, hinted at future shifts. Your bronze tools would soon give way to harder, cheaper metal, a change you sense in the ore you smelt. As you cool the spearhead, its surface gleaming, you wonder, how will these advancements, forged in fire and myth, not only strengthen Mycenae but redefine the tools and tales of Greece's future? You're outside your forge in Mycenae, around 1200 BCE, the sun setting as you inspect a finished bronze sword, its edge sharp enough to slice through leather. The Cyclops tales, now sung by a passing poet, echo in your ears, likening your craft to the giants' divine forges. Your work's melting, alloying, shaping has pushed Mycenaean metallurgy to its peak, arming warriors, equipping farmers, and fueling trade that binds Greece to distant lands. This final chapter reveals how your forge, blending myth and innovation, not only strengthened a civilization but left a legacy in metal and story, shaping Greece's future and resonating in modern technology and law. Your advancements culminated in a golden age of bronze. You'd perfected alloys 9 parts copper to 1 part tin for durability, as seen in the bronze armor from Dendra's tombs. These innovations, honed through countless hours, made Mycenaean warriors formidable, their swords and spears outmatching rivals. Your tools, plows, axes boosted harvests, feeding growing cities, while ornate bronze vessels, traded to Egypt or the Levant, brought wealth. Archaeological finds, like the Alaburan shipwrecks bronze ingots, show your forge's reach, connecting Mycenae to a global network. The Iliad's descriptions of gleaming armor reflect your craft's impact, each blade a testament to your skill. Yet, the labor was relentless. Burns scarred your hands, and failed casts meant sleepless nights. Your resilience mirroring the metal you shaped. The Cyclops myth, tying your work to Hephaestus, gave it divine weight. Villagers revered your forge, leaving offerings to ensure strong metal. Seeing your fire as a spark of the gods, This belief unified communities, apprentices, traders, and women weaving bellows all supported your work, their efforts as vital as yours. The transition to iron, emerging now, promised new possibilities. You'd experiment with crude iron knives, harder but brittle, foreshadowing a shift that would reshape Greece after Mycenaean's fall. Your bronze, though, defined an era, its legacy in tools and weapons enduring in archaeological troves. As Mycenaean power waned, your craft's impact lived on. Classical Greeks, finding bronze relics, wove them into tales of Cyclopean forges, while their own smiths adopted your techniques for iron, crafting hoplite armor. Philosophers like Empedocles, studying fire's transformative power, owed a debt to your experiments. Today, metallurgy's foundations, alloys, forging trace back to your forge, seen in everything from steel bridges to spacecraft. The Cyclops myth endures in literature, a nod to the awe your work inspired. Your labor, though humble, proved that human ingenuity, not divine giants, forged progress. A lesson echoed in modern innovation. As you set the sword aside, its gleam fading in the dusk, you reflect. Your forge didn't just shape metal, it crafted a civilization's strength, proving that even the smallest sparks can ignite enduring change. The silent loom, weaving as a metaphor for fate in Greek myth. And so imagine yourself in a sunlit courtyard in Athens around 50 BCE. The rhythmic clack of a loom filling the air as you thread wool through a wooden frame. You're a weaver, your hands deftly crafting a cloth destined for a noble's cloak or a temple offering. In ancient Greece, weaving was more than a domestic task. It was a potent metaphor for fate, entwined with myths of the Moirae, the three fates who spun, measured and cut the threads of life. Your work, repetitive and uncelebrated, mirrors their cosmic task, shaping not just fabric but the social and spiritual fabric of Greece. This story of resilience, rooted in the daily labor of women like you, reveals how weaving wove together myth, society, and destiny, influencing everything from household roles to divine narratives. Weaving was a cornerstone of Greek life, essential for clothing, sails, and sacred offerings. You'd spin wool or flax, dyed with madder or saffron, into thread, then weave it on an upright loom, your fingers guiding the shuttle through countless passes. The Odyssey praises such skill, with Penelope's loom symbolizing cunning and loyalty as she delays suitors by weaving and unweaving a shroud. Your cloth, though mundane, held value, traded in markets or offered to Athena, patron of weaving. Archaeological finds, like loom weights from Olympus, show its ubiquity. Every household had a loom, and women, from slaves to nobles, wove daily. Your work sustained families, as cloth was currency in a world where coinage was new, and it bound communities through shared labor. Mothers taught daughters, neighbors swapped dyes. The Moirae, Clatho, Lachesis, and Atropos elevated your craft to myth. You'd hear poets in the Agoras sing of them spinning life's thread, measuring its length and cutting it, their power even over Zeus. These tales cast your loom as a microcosm of fate, each thread a life shaped by divine will. Temples received your woven offerings, like the peplos for Athena's statue during the Panathenaea, linking your labor to the gods. Yet, the work was grueling, aching backs. Cramped fingers aren't often invisible, as men rarely wove. Still, your skill gave women agency. Penelope's ruse or Arachne's challenge to Athena showed weaving as defiance. Though myths warned of hubris, skepticism existed, too. You'd overhear philosophers like Xenophanes question the fates' literal power, arguing fate was human choice, not divine thread. Yet, the metaphor held, shaping how Greeks saw destiny ordered yet fragile, like your cloth. As you tighten a warped thread, the loom's unsteady, you wonder, how did weaving, your quiet craft, shape not just cloth but the very stories Greece tells about life and fate? You're in a crowded Athenian household around 30 BCE. The loom's steady thump blending with the chatter of women preparing wool. As a weaver, you're crafting a peplos for the Panathenaic festival, your fingers weaving intricate patterns of Athena's victories. Your work, though repetitive, is a thread in Greece's cultural tapestry, where weaving symbolized fate through the Moirae's mythic loom. These tales, sung at festivals or whispered by elders, elevate your craft, linking it to divine order and human destiny. In the daily rhythm of spinning and weaving, you and other women shape not just cloth but society's resilience, weaving bonds that hold families and cities together amidst war and change. Weaving's role extended beyond the household. You produce cloth for trade, sails for ships, or offerings for temples, each piece vital to Greece's economy and rituals. The Iliad describes Helen weaving a tapestry of Trojan battles, her loom a mirror to the fates' work. Your peplos, destined for Athena's statue, is a communal effort. Girls spin the wool, elders dye it, and you weave, your patterns reflecting cosmic order. Archaeological finds, like clay loom weights from Corinth, show weaving scale. Every home hummed with looms, women's labor sustaining families when men were at war. You'd share techniques with neighbors, trading madder for indigo, your courtyard a hub of collaboration. This work gave women agency. Penelope's cunning loom or Philomela's woven tale of betrayal showed weaving as power, though myths like Arachne's warned of its limits. The Moirais myth framed your craft as sacred. You'd hear priests invoke Clotho's spinning, Lachesis' measuring, and Atropos' cutting during rituals, linking your threads to life's inevitability. At the Panathenaea, your peplos, paraded through Athens, was a divine offering believed to secure Athena's favor. Yet, the labor was taxing. Long hours bent over the loom, eyes straining in dim light. Your resilience mirrored Greece's as women wove through plagues or invasions, their cloth-clothing soldiers or bartered for grain. Oracles sometimes guided your patterns, claiming designs pleased the gods, tying your work to prophecy. Skepticism grew, though. You'd overhear philosophers like Anaxagoras in the Agora arguing fate was chance, not divine threads, challenging the Moirais' sway. Still, the metaphor persisted. Citizens saw life's fragility in your cloth's delicate weave. Your work, though unseen by warriors or statesmen, was the backbone of polis life, its threads binding communities. As you weave Athena's image, the festival nearing, you wonder, how will your loom, echoing the fates, not only clothe Greece, but shape its understanding of destiny and resilience? You're at the Panathenaic festival in Athens, the 30 BCE, the sun glinting off your woven peplos as it's paraded to Athena's temple. As a weaver, your hands ache from months of crafting this cloth, its patterns of gods and heroes a mirror to the Moirais' cosmic loom. Your work, carried through cheering crowds, completes a cycle of labor and devotion, weaving together myth, fate, and society. This final chapter shows how weaving, your silent craft, not only clothed Greece but shaped its understanding of destiny, fostering resilience in a world of uncertainty and leaving a legacy in art, literature, and modern metaphors of fate. The festival marks your craft's zenith. The peplos, draped over Athena's statue, is a communal offering, its creation uniting women across Athens, spinners, dyers, and weavers like you. The Odyssey's Penelope, weaving to outwit suitors, reflects your agency. Your cloth, traded or gifted, sustained families during the Peloponnesian War. Archaeological evidence, like loom weights and spindle whirls from Athens, shows weaving's scale. Every household contributed, making cloth a currency of survival. Your work-bound communities, neighbors shared dyes, daughters learned from mothers, and your peplos tied Athens to its patron goddess, believed to secure divine protection. Myths of the Moirais Clotho spinning, Lachesis measuring, Atropos cutting framed your loom as fate's tool, each thread a life's path, resonating in rituals where priests blessed your cloth. Yet, your labor was grueling endless hours, strained eyes, and often overlooked as men dominated public spheres. Still, weaving empowered women. Stories like Philomela's, weaving her tale of betrayal, showed your craft as a voice for the silenced. Oracles sometimes dictated patterns, claiming they pleased the fates, linking your loom to prophecy. Skeptics, like Plato, questioned the Moirais' power, arguing free will shape destiny. But the metaphor endured. Citizens saw life's fragility in your delicate threads, a worldview that steadied Greece through crises. Weaving's legacy outlasted your time. Classical art, like vase paintings of women at looms, preserved your craft, while myths of the fates influenced Roman parquet and medieval literature. Today, phrases like spinning a yarn or threads of fate echo your work, seen in textiles or storytelling. Your loom's resilience producing cloth through war and loss mirrors modern communities rebuilding through craft or shared narratives. Your peplos, a fleeting offering, wove Greece's identity, proving that humble labor can shape profound cultural truths. As the crowd cheers, your peplos raised to Athena. You reflect, your loom didn't just craft cloth, it spun a narrative of fate, showing how quiet resilience threads through time.